A menacing, masked figure stands over the defeated forms of several guards. He announces that the hero has been captured and orders his forces to retreat. Nearby, a young gate guard named Silva watches with a look of annoyance, thinking they haven't even reached the main story yet. Another guard beside him, panicked, questions what he is doing and urges him to run. This is the tale of a simple background soldier who, through his extensive knowledge of the world as a game, became the strongest of all, yet desperately wishes to hide his true strength. He faces down the masked antagonist, knowing that for his goal of a peaceful life, it would be best if his involvement didn't matter. The world is that of Brave of Asterisk, an RPG more commonly known as Brajo. In it, players assume the role of the hero, Alan, and fight against demons. A young woman reflects on this, remembering it as a game she was obsessed with before she was reincarnated. She recalls how players could forge strong bonds with friends, with those relationships sometimes blossoming into something more. That's right, he, too, was reincarnated into another world. In his previous life, he was an employee at an exploitative company, where the exhaustion finally caught up to him and he died from overwork. Now, he has been reborn into the world of his beloved game, living his new life as a gate guard named Silva in the capital, Valencia. He is brought back to the present when his captain, Modi, calls out to him, announcing it's time to switch places. Silva agrees, thinking to himself that while it's a shame he wasn't reincarnated as the hero, Alan, this quiet life isn't so bad. As he walks off, Modi reminds him not to forget to buy the item he'd asked for. As he walks through the town, Silva reflects on his good fortune. Compared to how swamped he was in his previous life, his current job as a gate guard, where he gets paid even if he slacks off a bit, is practically a heavenly existence. His stroll leads him past a market stall where a vendor is trying to persuade a young woman to buy a sword. The merchant insists the high-quality blade would be a perfect fit for her and offers to sell it cheaply. The woman turns, revealing herself to be Charlie. She politely states that she is not a swordswoman. Silva freezes, his mind racing. He recognizes her instantly as Charles Orland, an important character who becomes an early ally in the game. He is utterly flabbergasted to see his favorite character from the game standing right in front of him. The vendor presses on, claiming the weapon is a holy sword blessed by the Fairy King, powerful enough to make even a novice strong. Silva internally notes the obvious lie, telling himself not to be fooled, but also admits that her naive side is quite cute. His composure breaks entirely. He can't believe it. Charlie, in the flesh, is so adorable. He feels an overwhelming sense of gratitude, thanking God for his reincarnation. He's glad he died. He is startled as a voice calls out, "Wait, Charles!" It is Alan, striding purposefully toward them through the market square. Alan ignores him and confronts the street vendor directly, pointing at the weapon on display. "Shopkeeper," he demands, "that sword is fake, isn't it?" As this happens, Silva observes the scene, internally noting that Alan is the protagonist of the game Brajo. He finds it strange to see the game's hero in person and wonders if events will unfold as they did in the story, with Alan eventually becoming Charlie's lover. The thought makes him visibly flustered, his face flushing as he mutters Charlie's name under his breath. Seeing his state, Charlie offers to walk with him to the castle's gate, as he is heading there to collect herbs. Silva stammers out his acceptance. As they prepare to leave, the vendor turns his attention to Silva, advising him not to believe what Alan said. With a gloomy expression on his face, Silva listens as the man offers to sell him the sword for a cheap price. The vendor continues his pitch, proclaiming that with this sword, even an ordinary person can become a hero. The words cause Silva's eyes to widen. Despite the tempting words, Silva gently pushes the sword away with a soft clink, stating that he is fine without it. He follows up with a gentle smile, explaining that a regular sword is more than enough for him, since he is only a gate guard. His firm refusal leaves the vendor momentarily perplexed. Muttering about what a strange fellow he is, the vendor decides to try and sell the sword to someone else. At that moment, Alan's voice rings out with conviction. He declares that he is not the hero, but nothing more than a background character, a mob. From a short distance away, Silva looks on, completely stunned by the proclamation. Alan's words trigger a memory. Silva recalls his past life, when he was swamped with work, and playing the game Brajo was his only source of enjoyment. The reflection in his eyes shows Alan and Charlie, figures from the world that was once his sole escape. He recalls his fondness for the world of the game. The characters are all charming, with Charlie being a personal favorite, and the scenario is magnificent. In his mind, everything is supposed to proceed according to that scenario. Alan and his comrades will save the world from the threat of demons and bring peace. His desire is simple. He wants to see that epicness come true with his own eyes. To do this, he plans to fall back on his old RPG habits. His strategy is to get stronger to the absolute maximum in the very early stages, ensuring an effective route for advancement. He has decided to utilize his game knowledge to survive this dangerous world where demons constantly attack humans. However, he clarifies to himself that this doesn't mean he wants to replace Alan. He is someone who respects the source material. Using his knowledge to his advantage, he would choose an appropriate place to practice for many years, raising his status to the maximum levels in secret. He concludes that just watching the scenario play out from afar is good enough for him. He would never forgive someone if they were to change the original story, even if that person were him. Snapping back to reality, Silva's face brightens with conviction. He exclaims that original works are the best, leaving Alan completely bewildered. Just then, their captain, Modi, arrives, noting that they are back. Modi laughs heartily, asking Silva if something good happened to him since he's so excited, and invites him for a drink after work. Silva enthusiastically agrees, declaring that nothing beats a beer after a day's work. The cheerful atmosphere is instantly shattered by a distant cry for help. At the gate, a menacing figure with white hair and glowing eyes appears. A demon has arrived. As Alan reacts in confusion, Silva freezes, recognizing the situation. He mutters the name of the event, the Wedge Day, questioning why demons are present. His mind races. He knows this event, the Wedge Day, is supposed to happen a month before the main story begins, an attack where demons who normally don't cooperate work together to strike the kingdom. In the game, no significant damage occurs, and the hero swiftly exterminates the demons, but something is wrong. His shock was broken by the captain's booming voice. Modi rallied the other guards, ordering them to hold their positions until the hero arrived, then turned on Silva, yelling at him to stop spacing out and move on. He focused on the creature, identifying it as a level 1 demon. It was not, he assessed, particularly strong. Still, it was not weak enough for a regular soldier to defeat alone. The guards, Alan among them, struggled to fend off the creature's assault. As the chaos continued, Silva wrestled with his thoughts. He decided to simply do his job as a gate guard for now, believing that taking out this single demon wouldn't drastically alter the scenario. His goal was to buy time until the true hero arrived. But in that moment of deliberation, the demon lunged past the defenders and struck Modi, who cried out in pain. The captain's cry spurred him into motion. Silva rushed to Modi's side, asking if he was all right. Modi insisted it was just a graze and told him not to worry. At that moment, the demon shrieked and fled. An enraged Alan turned, shouting at Silva for letting it escape after it had hurt their captain. Watching Silva's retreating back, Modi stared in stunned silence. He wondered himself if the young guard had always been that fast on his feet. Meanwhile, far from the commotion at the gate, Charles Orland sat by a peaceful stream, dipping her bare feet into the cool, splashing water. Her brief rest concluded, she pulled on her boot. Having finished collecting herbs, she decided it was time to regroup with Alan. Just as she prepared to leave, a sudden rustling from the dense bushes nearby caught her ear, putting her on alert. She cautiously approached the tree-line, peering into the deep shadows. "Is someone there?" she called out into the darkness. Her call into the woods was met by the sound of someone dashing through the undergrowth. It was Silva, still moving at speed after his recent battle, lamenting the demon's escape. He thought to himself that the creature was incredibly fast, and perhaps he should have aimed to cripple one of its legs. His thoughts were cut short as a sudden presence made him stop in his tracks, his eyes widening in surprise. He looked up to see Charles Orland standing just ahead, causing him to wonder what she was doing out here. She, in turn, looked at him with wide, surprised eyes, calling out his name. "Charlie." Her mind raced with panic. She recognized him as Charlie, a figure who, according to the game she knew, was not supposed to die in this place. As she struggled to compose herself, he steeled his own resolve, his gaze hardening. He told himself that everything would be fine. She was not supposed to die either. Just then, a menacing figure with long white hair lunged from the shadows, raising a massive clawed weapon to strike Charles Orland down. She let out a terrified scream. In response, Silva roared, drawing his sword in a flash and vowing that the attacker would not lay a hand on his Charlie. The assailant unleashed a powerful technique, identified as Valencia's sword style, a devastating move called spinning top. The massive blade swung through the air, aimed directly at the defenseless young woman, but the attack never landed. In the next instant, the assailant lay defeated on the forest floor. Silva stood over the fallen foe, calmly sheathing his sword as Charles Orland remained on the ground, shaken but unharmed. He turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable but his gaze sharp, surveying the aftermath of the brief, violent encounter. From the ground, she looked up at him, her fear giving way to a blush of admiration and relief as she watched her savior. His stoic demeanor immediately vanished. He rushed to her side, frantically asking if she was all right and if the attacker had managed to injure her. With a small smile, she confirmed that she was okay. He stands frozen, a look of pure shock on his face as the realization of what he's just done crashes down on him. He stammers, unable to form a coherent thought. His internal panic is interrupted when Charles Orland asks who he is. Flustered, he laughs nervously and blurts out that he's just a gate guard. She smiles, clarifying that she wasn't asking about his job. She wants to know his name. She then leans closer, her expression earnest and a slight blush on her cheeks as she implores him to tell her his name. He looks on, surprised by her directness. He shyly acquiesces, stating his name is Silva. Overjoyed, Charles Orland thanks him, repeating his name with delight. It is clear that the scenario of his life has just taken an unexpected. There exists a simple mob soldier who, through his unique knowledge, became the strongest of all, and now wants only to hide his true strength. He finds himself in a tense moment with Charlie Orland, who places a finger to her lips with a knowing look. His mind screams in panic. He just made contact with Charlie. Using the first excuse he can think of, he blurts out that he has guard duty and must get going, hastily retreating from surprised Charlie. As he flees, he clutches his head, agonizing over his past actions. He recalls that he had no other choice but to take out a demon in front of her, a decision he now fears might alter the course of events. His frantic escape is interrupted when his captain, Modi, calls out his name. He turns, startled, to face his captain. Modi informs him that he has a direct summons from the captain of the elite Holy Guard and must report to their headquarters. Silva is stunned, asking if he heard correctly. Modi's expression is severe. He tells Silva that while he doesn't know what kind of screw-up he's committed, he'll be ready to take care of his funeral. The ominous warning makes Silva break out in a cold sweat. He continues, reminding Silva that the captain of the elite Holy Knights Order is known for being incredibly stern, but adds with a gruff laugh that he hopes Silva gets off with just a lecture. Silva apologizes for his ill-omened reaction. Following his orders, Silva arrives at the formidable stone fortress that serves as the elite Holy Knights Order headquarters. He is met at the entrance by guards who, after confirming everything is in order, begin to escort him inside. As he is led through the halls, he looks up with a nervous sweat, thinking to himself that he must do everything in his power to avoid meeting her. However, inside an office just above, the very person he dreads meeting stands by a window. Elda Snow White, the captain, is calmly reviewing a document, awaiting his arrival. She sat in her office, her eyes widening as she scanned the document before her. Outside the large window, Sylvia approached, completely unaware of the scrutiny he was under. In a sudden burst of manic energy, she ripped the paper to shreds, a wide, unsettling grin spreading across her face. Just then, the door rattled and Silva entered. Elda greeted him cheerfully. "You've done well to come, Silva." Internally, Silva was taken aback, recognizing her key features from the game he knew. Lustrous silver hair, blue eyes as deep as the ocean, and a notably impressive chest. He identified her immediately. Elda Snow White, captain of the elite Knights Order. His mind also supplied the fact that in the game Brajo, she was a conquerable love interest. Her expression shifted to a pout. "Don't you get it? You're one thick-headed guy," she remarked. Feeling uneasy, Silva cautiously asked, Did you need me for something, Captain?" A terrible feeling began to creep up on him. He realized with dawning horror that the only reason she would have summoned him was that, for some reason, Elda knew about his true abilities. His fear was immediately confirmed. Elda leaned forward, her eyes sharp and a knowing smirk on her lips. "You're the one who took out the demon, right?" The direct accusation made him flinch. He tried to feign ignorance, asking what she could possibly mean. Elda specified that she was talking about the demon attack from the other day, where a sighting report mentioned a demon's corpse had been found ripped apart. She laid out her deduction, explaining that the demon had traces of being felled by a technique called spinning top. Excluding the hero, the only one capable of that feat is the captain of the Holy Knights Order, herself. But, she noted, she wasn't there when the attack happened. Her gaze bore into him as she posed the final question. "So, pray tell me, who could have possibly defeated the demon?" Without waiting for an answer, she delivered her conclusion. "A person of his skill should dedicate himself to working as a knight for the country. It's time you face the facts," she declared, leaving Silva utterly cornered and speechless. He internally panics, realizing that admitting the truth would shatter his peaceful life. Desperately trying to deflect, he questions her logic, asking why she so readily dismissed the possibility that the hero was the one who defeated the demon. In response, Captain Snow White taps a finger on the table, calling him naive. She explains that the hero is obligated to report all such victories to the country, yet the spider's defeat remains officially unknown. She brushes aside his protests, telling him to come to terms with reality and join the Knights Order. Her composure breaks in a flash of theatrical shock. She slams her hand down, aghast that he still refuses to admit the truth. From the side, Silva retorts that she has no solid proof for her claims. She leans forward, shifting her strategy from accusation to persuasion. She questions why he is so vehemently against the idea of joining the Knights Order, pointing out the handsome living wage and numerous other benefits he would receive from the country, incomparable to his current situation. He explains his hesitation. While he understands a knight's role is to support the hero and protect the country, he is troubled by the fact that he would be forced to undertake missions alongside the hero. He then states his core reason plainly. He does not want to get close to the main characters. Confused by his choice of words, Elda asks what he means. Silva quickly dismisses it as nothing, though he reaffirms to himself that he has no intention of becoming a knight. Her expression hardens, a glint in her eye. She remarks that his refusal is a crying shame. With a newfound resolve, she declares that if this is his stance, she can no longer afford to be picky about the method she employs. Silva can only look on, bewildered by her sudden shift in demeanor. Charles stares in shock as Elda presents him with a forged letter of admission to the Knights Order, complete with his own signature, Silva. He cries out in protest, insisting that he never signed such a document. He can't believe she would go so far. The action brings to mind a past encounter with a masked figure, who once remarked that becoming the captain of the Knights Order allows one to get away with forgery. Seeing his reaction, Elda casually dismisses her own forgery, claiming she was just kidding and cannot force people to join against their will. She then offers him a different rolled-up document. She unrolls the paper, revealing a notice about an injured man. Elda changes her approach, stating she will give up on inviting him to join if he does her a favor instead. Taking the paper, Charles asks what it is. With a serious expression, Elda reveals the true nature of her request. She wants Charles to stop a man named Brajo Bertoli from joining the Knights Order. She clarifies that Brajo is an applicant for the entrance trials. Charles recognizes the surname, asking if he belongs to the famously powerful Bertoli family. Elda confirms this is true, but grimly adds that the man is an irredeemable scumbag. Elda explains her predicament. Since Brajo is a noble, she can't simply fail him during the trials without risking pressure and backlash from the higher-ups. Pointing directly at Charles, she declares that this is where he comes in. Charles realizes he's being used for sabotage. Elda lays out her plan. She will arrange for Charles to fight Brajo in a mock battle during the entrance trials. She wants him to defeat Brajo so thoroughly that it convinces everyone he is unfit to join the order. He looks across the desk and seeks final confirmation of their deal. If he performs this favor, will she truly stop trying to recruit him? Understanding this is the exchange, he agrees. A wide, confident smile spreads across Elda's face. She confirms the deal without hesitation, leaning forward and declaring, "I'm counting on you." Within the stone walls of the capital, life continues around the formidable castle of the Knights Order. Elsewhere, Charles walks with a gloomy expression, weighed down by the difficult task he has been assigned. He internally laments the situation, realizing that while Brajo is a character who doesn't appear in the main story, he still has connections to the Knights Order. Any misstep on his part could inadvertently alter the plot he knows so well. He considers that he knows almost nothing about this man who doesn't appear in the story. His first priority, he decides, must be to gather information. As he walks, lost in thought, a sudden tap on his shoulder startles him. He internally panics, determined to minimize contact with the story's main characters to avoid any more complications. He whirls around in shock to see a young woman with light-toned hair. She looks at him with a gentle, questioning smile and speaks his last name, Silva. Flustered, he insists she shouldn't be meeting with him, but she quickly dismisses his concern. She tells him she's happy to have finally found him, explaining that she came looking as soon as she had steeled her resolve. She then asks why he ran away after saving her that day, revealing that she has been searching for him ever since. Charles stammers that he had some pressing matters to attend to. He bows his head slightly, offering a sincere apology for leaving without a word. The young woman simply looks at him, taking in his words. She then points a finger at him, changing the subject. "By the way," she asks, "why do you know my name, Silva?" Charles freezes, a wave of panic washing over his face as he realizes the misunderstanding. He is immediately struck with guilt, realizing he lied to the girl before him. To answer his unasked question, Charles Orland explains that she was assigned to guard nobles at a party and happened to see the list of attendees, asking if that was how he knew her name. He can only manage a stammered, "okay," in response. Seeing his reaction, she puffs out her cheeks in a slight pout. He tries to protest, saying he can't just accept her offer, but she cuts him off, telling him there's no need to be so formal or polite with her. Her expression turns serious as she insists she will do anything for him, even offering to help with his work. He attempts to downplay his actions, stating he simply did his duty as a soldier and that thanks are unnecessary. She remains insistent. A powerful realization hits him. Granting the wish of his favorite character is the duty of every fan. He feels compelled to help her. Taking his silence as an opening, she reveals she knows he is conducting an investigation and asks if she can tag along. With a resigned but genuine smile, he agrees. In the capital's red light district, Valencia, Charles, and Charlie begin their investigation. Their target is connected to the Bertoli family, one of the most prominent noble houses in the country. An informant explains that gathering information was simple due to the family's notoriety. He relays the dark rumors circulating about them, that they've given a huge sum of money to the royal family to secure their high peerage, and that they are involved in human trafficking and illegal drugs. As they absorb the grim report, Charlie glances over at Charles while they walk through the crowded street, her expression unreadable. She then notices him stop and asks what's wrong, mentioning that according to her information, their target should be somewhere in this area. Misinterpreting his pause, a blush spreads across Charlie's face. Covering her mouth with her hands, she shyly asks, "Silva, where do you plan to take me?" He, however, is focused on the mission, stating he hopes they find the man they're looking for, Brajo, soon. Realizing her mistake, Charlie quickly claims she was just kidding, causing Charles to become flustered and insist she has it all wrong. As it turns out, their target, Brajo, is infamous for wasting his parents' money on alcohol every day and wandering the streets while drunk, as shown by him carelessly kicking over a table of drinks in a tavern. Continuing their search through a less crowded alley, Charles wonders aloud where Brajo usually stays. Just then, a loud growl echoes from his stomach. He knows Brajo is in the red light district, but realizes with a sigh that he might have come a bit too early to find him. He internally laments the embarrassment of his stomach growling in front of his companion. Noticing his discomfort, Charlie kindly asks if he is hungry and suggests they go grab a bite to eat. He agrees, admitting that he's starving as well. Charlie, catching a pleasant aroma, points towards its source and suggests they investigate the establishment for some tasty food. Inside, Charlie takes a large, enthusiastic bite of a hamburger. He watches her, a look of surprise on his face. Charles recalls reading that she loves hamburgers despite her noble background, but finds the reality of it unexpectedly charming. He takes a sip of his drink, observing that her hands and mouth are quite small. With a gloomy expression, Charlie laments that she can never get a good bite, which always makes her feel inexplicably sad. Charles can only reply that it can't be helped. She looks down at her meal, considering that it's not all bad, since she still gets to eat the bun. As she nibbles on the bun, her expression softens. She seems to realize that this must be how the version of her from the game usually eats hamburgers. Her adorable display overwhelms Charles. He feels as though he might pass on to the afterlife from the sheer force of her cuteness. With the meal finished and the plate empty, Charles thanks her for the food. He asks where she will search next, noting that it has already gotten late. He begins to explain that he will continue the investigation on his own, as the red light district gets dangerous at night, but is cut off by the restaurant door slamming open. Framed in the doorway, radiating an air of menace, stands Brajo, burly flanked by his armored bodyguards. He arrogantly demands to know if there are any spare tables on the second floor. His presence immediately soured the atmosphere. A waitress nervously recounted his past misdeeds to a colleague, whispering about how he'd previously snapped over slow service, thrown a glass, and even forced himself on the female staff. He then erupted, his face twisting in fury as he bellowed at the staff. He couldn't believe they had no spare tables for him, Brajo burly, whose very presence he considered a blessing upon the establishment. His rage escalating, he shoved the waitress to the floor. She stammered an apology as he loomed over her, arrogantly questioning if she knew who his father was and demanding she make a table for him immediately. Watching the scene unfold, Charlie quietly asked Charles if that was their man. He confirmed it with a grim expression, remarking that Brajo was indeed the utter dirtbag their intel suggested. Deciding it wasn't worth the effort, he sneered at the fallen waitress, calling her useless trash. He declared he would simply go to another restaurant and turn to leave. As he moved, however, Charlie looked up from her plate, her attention suddenly caught. She saw that Brajo had stopped. He was looking directly at their table, a slow, dawning expression on his face as if recognizing someone. He changed his course, approaching them with a wide, unsettling grin. Leaning towards Charlie, he addressed her by her full name, Miss Charles Orland, while Charles looked on, his expression hardening. He attempted a charming tone, asking why she was acting so cold and suggesting they had met at Noble's party. Unimpressed and confused, Charlie simply asked if she had met him before. Her lack of recognition visibly infuriated him. As his face darkened with anger, Charlie nervously confirmed that she did not remember him, her hand rising to her mouth in unease. Her failure to recognize him contorts Brajo Bertolli's features into a mask of pure malice. His eyes widen with manic fury, and a cruel sneer spreads across his lips. He clenches a fist, his voice low and threatening as he promises that if her memory is truly so fuzzy, he will take his sweet time to ensure she never forgets him again. Inside a tavern, a young nobleman with an exaggerated, eager expression leans across a table towards Charlie Orland. He suggests leaving the dingy establishment for a high-class restaurant, stating that her beauty is famous even in high society and that he wishes to get closer to her. Charlie, seated opposite him, looks on with a weary, unimpressed expression. From nearby, Silva watches the exchange, his face contorted in anger at the man's shamelessness. Charlie, meanwhile, closes her eyes and flatly states that she is not interested. She repeats her rejection, but the nobleman presses on, offering to treat her to exquisite food, liquor, or even luxurious fruit juice. Charlie sighs in exasperation, retorting that she is not yet of drinking age. His ingratiating smile vanishes, replaced by a furious scowl. Internally, he seethes, thinking of her only as this wench. As the nobleman's irritation becomes palpable, Silva steps forward, placing a hand on Charlie's shoulder. The nobleman points, demanding to know if Silva is her bodyguard. Silva confidently confirms his role, thinking to himself that this declaration provides the perfect incentive to protect Charlie from any further advances. Caught off guard by his intervention, she looks away with a slight blush, hesitantly affirming that he is, indeed, her bodyguard. Silva flashes a menacing grin at the nobleman, the thought of cutting his head off crossing his mind. The nobleman, however, erupts in derisive laughter, mocking the idea that someone with such a plain, mob face could ever be a bodyguard for a noble. His laughter continues as he questions if Charlie's family is suffering from a lack of manpower, offering to lend her one of his own bodyguards. Silva looks on in dismay, realizing his attempt to help has only resulted in Charlie being made a fool of. To emphasize his point, the nobleman gestures to a group of large, heavily armored men standing behind him. He boasts that they are his elite bodyguards, former knights of the Holy Knights Order, handpicked by his family and perfectly suited to serve him. Ignoring the spectacle, Charlie turns to leave, simply telling Silva to go. As he follows, Silva's face is a mask of disgust. He finds it pathetic that former members of the Holy Knights Order would sell themselves out to serve such a man. As Silva and Charlie stood in stunned silence, the nobleman, Brajo, let out a boisterous laugh. He mocked the idea that Charlie would make it safely to her mansion with such a wimpy-looking bodyguard, his words dripping with contempt. From nearby, a new voice cut in. A confident young woman with her hair in a ponytail declared that the nobleman's own bodyguards couldn't even hold a candle to Silva. Later, away from the scene, Charlie apologized to Silva. She confessed that she became angry when they made fun of him and never imagined he would get mad on her behalf. She then worried that provoking them might have been a bad idea. Silva, however, seemed lost in thought, merely asking if they needed something from him. His mind was already elsewhere. He realized this was the perfect chance to gather information on Brajo and determine if he was a character who could affect the overarching plot. Just then, the nobleman's bodyguard approached, stating their intent to put the hooded girl's claims to the test. Charlie glanced at Silva, her expression filled with concern. Now, standing with the hooded girl, he faced the imposing guards. One of them declared that was what he wanted to hear, and Silva simply replied, "You're on." With a cold expression, Silva cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing ominously. He calmly asked the guards to tell him everything they knew about Brajo's wrongdoings. The men, once so confident, yelped in sudden terror. A heavy thud followed as the intimidated guards fell to their knees. One of the guards began to confess, admitting there was more. As he spoke, Silva was hit with the full scope of Brajo's depravity, selling counterfeit drugs, blackmail, and physical assault. The guard concluded that their master was one hell of a scumbag. Held firmly by one of Brajo's men, Charles listens as the knight reveals his master's scheme. Brajo plans to use the entrance trials to find leverage against the captain and seize complete control of the knight's order. The revelation solidifies his resolve. Charles understands that he must prevent the plot from straying from its original path. If Brajo succeeds in making the order answer directly to him, the townspeople will be endangered, and the entire country will fester with corruption. He looks at the defeated knight and instructs him to leave, suggesting he fabricate a report for his master about winning the fight. Charles makes it clear that neither of them will speak a word of what truly transpired. As they walk away, Charlie turns to him, her expression one of awe. She calls him by his alias, Silva, and notes that no regular soldier could have wiped out a demon so easily. She then asks the question burning in her mind. How did he become so strong? He answers with a confident smile, claiming it was just tough training from many years spent hiding in the mountains. Charlie looks at him, puzzled by the strange explanation. His demeanor darkens as he elaborates. It was a place crawling with monsters where he nearly died every day, and that is how he grew strong. As he speaks, a menacing, shadowy aura erupts around him. Seeing her concern, he quickly tells Charlie she doesn't need to resort to such perilous methods, prompting her to ask if she would get strong by doing the same. Her expression softens into a smile. She tells Silva that if that's how he feels, she will trust him. He beams, betting his life that she will get stronger without having to endure such hardships. The tension broken, he announces that he's hungry and suggests they find something to eat. Charlie immediately asks if it will be his treat. Later that night, with a castle tower silhouetted against the stars, Charlie's voice playfully declares that of course he should pay, as all nerds are duty-bound to treat their favorites. Charles's thoughts are elsewhere. He clenches his fist, reaffirming his need to stop Brajo's plan at all costs. At that very moment, a public announcement declares the start of the 127th entrance trials for the Knight's Order. The first exam will be a mock fight, with one-on-one bouts decided by lottery. He stands among the other trial participants, surprised to find himself face-to-face with Brajo. The nobleman smirks, recognizing him as the dull-looking bodyguard from their previous encounter. Brajo notes that Charles doesn't look as beaten as he should, revealing that his bodyguards had reported back to him. They were meant to ensure Charles wouldn't dare oppose him again. Charles coolly retorts that he could say the same. He explains with a slight smile that he visited the church to buy a healing potion, admitting that it was quite expensive. The comment seems designed to provoke. The taunt works. Brajo scoffs at the need for a simple healing potion, calling Charles a peon. He boastfully gestures to his own gleaming armor, declaring it to be top-shelf equipment made from extremely rare orichalcum ore. Just then, an official announcement rings out, summoning Brajo, Bertoli, and Silva to the center of the training grounds. Brajo erupts in laughter, mocking Charles's misfortune at being matched against him. Playing the part of the intimidated underdog, Charles forces a nervous smile and agrees. Still gloating, Brajo turns to the examiner, calling Charles a mob soldier who narrowly escaped him before. He brazenly asks what would happen if he were to kill his opponent by chance. The examiner plainly states that doing so would result in disqualification. Ignoring the warning, a crazed grin spreads across Brajo's face. With a cry of "Here I come," he lunges forward, sword raised to strike. In a flash, Charles flicks a small, hard object that clinks against Brajo's gauntlet. The impact makes Brajo cry out and drop his sword. Charles feigns innocence, asking if his hand slipped. Internally, he assesses the situation. Even if he hadn't disarmed him, Brajo's armor would repel a normal blow, but a strong one would be fatal. He wonders why his opponent isn't retaliating. Clutching his hand, Brajo sputters that he was merely giving Charles a handicap by letting him have the first attack. Crouching low, Charles mockingly offers to attack him properly now, just as Brajo had intended to do first. With a confident smile, Charles accepts the offer, He explains that the projectile numbed Brajo's arm, rendering him unable to swing his sword. Before Brajo can react, Charles strikes his wrist with a sharp wham, sending the nobleman's sword flying out of his grasp. He looks down at his opponent, who is now sprawled on the ground. Charles dryly observes that it looks like Brajo tripped. Scrambling for an excuse, Brajo shouts that he simply stumbled. His face twists in fury as he screams that he has yet to fight seriously, dismissing Charles's success as a series of lucky strokes. Brajo's taunts have no effect. Standing calmly across the arena, Charles sees his opponent's discarded sword glinting on the ground and understands. He resolves to end this unwanted fight now. In response, a faint glow envelopes his own sword as he channels his power into the blade. He focuses on a single technique, magic enhancement. This technique is an application of magic, which is fundamentally one's inner mental energy. By cladding a sword in this energy, a user can cut through iron as if it were butter. If applied to one's own body, it grants the strength of steel. The ability to manipulate magic is what separates heroes from ordinary people. It is the key to overcoming foes like demons, whose bodies are naturally far more durable than a human's. Yet, for all its power, most of humanity lives and dies without ever sensing the magic that flows within the world. An overwhelming pressure emanates from Charles, causing his opponent, Brajo, to sweat profusely. Charles calmly identifies Brajo's armor as being made of orichalcum. Stuttering, Brajo asks what of it, unnerved by how completely Charles seems to have changed. He continues with a confident smirk, informing Sir Brajo that he is now attacking. After all, he points out, Brajo cannot win the duel if he doesn't launch an attack himself. Brajo panics at the declaration, shouting in disbelief and asking if Charles plans to kill him. He wrongly concludes that Charles must have been hired for a pittance by a group of bottom-feeder nobles. The insult causes Charles's expression to darken. His sudden shift in demeanor makes Brajo recoil in fear, wondering what is wrong with him and noting it is like he's a different person. Charles's voice is cold as he confirms that Brajo is, in fact, talking about Charles Orland. Terrified by the murderous look in Charles's eyes, Brajo's bravado evaporates. He hastily changes his approach, declaring that he will hire Charles himself with his own money. He desperately continues his offers, promising a fortune that woman could never hope to pay, and even offers women as a prize. But Charles remains unmoved, asking if Brajo is ready and warning him not to move if he values his life, causing Brajo to let out a squeak of fear. Brajo makes one last, fatal offer, promising finer women who are better than Charles Orland. This is the final straw. Enraged, Charles roars for him to shut up and to never say her name again. In a blur of motion, he lunges forward, unleashing a powerful sword technique he calls out as Valencia's sword style, White Waterfall. The blade descends in a swift, powerful arc. The sword slashes into Brajo's shoulder with a metallic clang. His face is a mask of pure shock as he sees the blade bite deep into his supposedly impenetrable armor, only able to stammer out a questioning what. With a final thud, the blade sinks deeper. Brajo screams in disbelief, unable to comprehend how his armor, forged from orichalcum, could possibly be pierced. Slumped on the arena floor, his prized armor shattered, the noble stammers his surrender. Charles stands over him, confirming the concession before letting out a quiet sigh of relief. With the fight won, he believes his mission is accomplished. All that remains is to report back to Elda. His victory, however, does not go unnoticed. From the stands, Charles Orland watches with a triumphant smile, celebrating the outcome. In another section of the crowd, one of the armored bodyguards stares in stunned silence, uttering the name Silva under his breath. The rising murmur of the crowd finally breaks through his focus. He stands rigid in the arena, a sudden wave of panic washing over his face as the implications of the crowd's attention dawn on him. His eyes widen in alarm. He had drawn far too much attention to himself. Inside an office, Captain Elda Snow White sits behind her desk and addresses Charles. She informs him that, thanks to his efforts, they have successfully prevented Brajo from joining the Knight's Order. She continues, her expression hardening as she declares Brajo's wrongdoings unforgivable. She promises they will gather solid proof of his vicious deeds to ensure he is thrown in jail, thanking Charles once more for his contribution. He responds with a confident smile, reminding her of the promise they made. He wants to make Brajo pay for insulting Charlie and states that he is counting on her to see it through. The captain agrees, confirming that from now on, she will no longer invite him to join the Knight's Order, acknowledging that he fulfilled his end of the bargain by helping to expose Brajo. His face lights up with pure joy. He exclaims that his peaceful days will finally return, expressing his sincere appreciation. Elda, however, looks taken aback, asking with surprise if he seriously doesn't want to join. Her disbelief intensifies, her eyes wide as she presses him, asking if he is absolutely sure. With tears of relief welling in his eyes, Charles emphatically confirms that he is certainly positive, which leaves Elda utterly stunned. Her composure shatters. She slams her hands on the desk and erupts in a tearful tantrum, shouting that this is different from what he promised and that he should be working for her as a knight. She wails, demanding to know why he refuses, crying that she wants him by her side. The outburst catches him completely off guard. He internally remarks that he hadn't anticipated a spoiled brat Elda event occurring. Seeing her crying, he sighs in resignation, realizing he must keep his promises, and offers her handkerchief. She accepts the handkerchief, sniffling her thanks and promising to wash it and return it to him. Defeated, she tells him to please continue his job as a gate guard. Charles looks on, visibly relieved by her concession. As he walks away, two onlookers observe him. One comments that he looks every bit like a background character, while the other notes he's different from what they've heard. Unaware of their chatter, Charles resolves to lay low for the time being. He stands silently, his expression troubled as he overhears nearby guards discussing yet another demon sighting, the third one this month. The news clearly weighs on him. The information sparks a thought. He internally connects the increased demon presence to the impending start of the main story, striding through the town with a sense of unease. He continues to ponder the situation, hoping this surge in demonic activity won't somehow affect the plot. Of all the times to have drawn attention to himself, he laments, it had to be now. His thoughts then drift to Alan, whom he considers the story's true protagonist. He feels certain that Alan is destined to bring a happy ending to this world, as that is how things are supposed to happen. But even so, a seed of doubt remains. His rumination is cut short by a loud slam from behind, causing him to whip around with a startled expression. He looks up in dawning horror to see a hand planted firmly on the wall beside him. A woman with a confident smile looms over him, and he realizes with dread who it must be. Before he can react, a figure lands gracefully in front of him, kicking up a cloud of dust. The woman, holding an elegant fan, announces her presence. "There you are, Silva," she says with a grin, identifying herself as the special grade hero Kaguya. Her dramatic arrival immediately draws the attention of everyone nearby. The crowd murmurs in awe, recognizing the famous and beautiful Lady Kaguya and wondering what a special grade hero is doing there. Ignoring the onlookers, Kaguya calls him darling, declaring she's been looking for him forever. Panicked by this interaction with a main character, Charles immediately tries to sneak away, desperate to maintain his distance. But his attempt to flee is instantly thwarted. Kaguya appears behind him, wrapping him in a tight embrace. "Where are you running off to and leaving your dear wife behind?" she asks playfully, as Charles silently screams for help, completely trapped. He internally scrambles to make sense of the situation, identifying the woman holding him, Kaguya, as a conquerable love interest from the world story. She is a non-standard being, the sole hero granted the title of special grade. She is humanity's trump card, exceptionally skilled in magic, and rumored to have once laughed while utterly destroying a level 4 demon. The most alarming part, he realizes, is that just like Elda, Kaguya knows about his true abilities. This knowledge makes her a real monster in his eyes. As she holds him close, he recalls that ever since she discovered his power, she has been fixated on him. This is especially confusing, as he believes Alan is supposed to be her soulmate. Kaguya, however, beams with joy, declaring that fate must have brought them together. He tries to deflect, sweat beading on his face as he asks her to forget about him for a moment and prioritize her duties. He points out that, as it happens, a lot of demons have been appearing lately. She looks down at him, acknowledging his point with a simple, "Oh, is that right?" before dismissing it entirely. She tells him that such matters are of no interest to her, as being with him is far more charming. Her flippant response leaves him aghast. He questions how she can even call herself a special grade hero. He begins to protest, stating that he doesn't recall them ever becoming a married couple, but she cuts him off. With a dramatic flourish, she sweeps past, declaring that of course she is allowed to be with him. She is his wife, after all. Ignoring his sputtering denial, Kaguya cheerfully asks when they should hold their wedding ceremony. Charles feels like he's talking to a brick wall, though he privately admits her offer is tempting. She then grabs his arm, announcing she's found an interesting cafe where the two of them can have some quality couple time. With that, she begins to drag him away through the street. He shouts after her, still insisting that he doesn't remember them becoming a married couple. Meanwhile, at the Holy Knights Order headquarters, Elda Snow White sits at her desk, staring at a document with a frustrated expression. She mutters about a cursed demon, lamenting that her Holy Knights have failed to capture it yet again. She stood alone, her frustration mounting as she slammed a fist on the desk. Damn all. Her thoughts turned to one person, Silva. If only he were with them, she believed they might have been able to turn this situation around. From her office, she gazed out over the city, the weight of the crisis pressing down on her. Her mind briefly flashed to an image of a simple, folded cloth left on a desk. She recalled her impression of him, a small smile touching her lips. He was a strange guy. Even now, finding herself in a perilous situation, she couldn't help but expect him to appear and do something about it. The memory faded as the present chaos crashed back in. A knight cried out in alarm. The hero had been captured by a horned demon. The enemy's numbers were overwhelming. With the worst possible outcome unfolding, Elda gave a sharp command for everyone to fall back, declaring she would buy them time. She stood firm, her resolve hardening. Her duty was to keep the damage caused by the demons to a minimum. Reinforcements in the form of Kaguya had already been summoned, but there was still time before she would arrive. Knowing some comrades were too injured to hold out much longer, she understood she had to reduce the enemy's numbers until then. She knew it would be a difficult fight. If she had only been facing mere level 1 demons, she could have defeated them even with her injuries. However, this was a tall order with powerful level 2 demons among the enemy. As she braced herself, a sharp pain erupted in her side as a clawed weapon struck home. The dark weapon had pierced her side. Despite the grievous wound, her eyes blazed with defiance. She had no intention of sacrificing herself for free. With a surge of adrenaline, she spun around, swinging her blade in a glittering arc. "Eat this," she yelled. The attack caught her assailant, Valencia, off guard, forcing the demon back. But even as she fought, Elda's thoughts were with her comrades nearby. But her opponent was relentless. Not so fast. Valencia roared, launching forward in a powerful lunge. Amidst the knights who were frozen in fear, the demon closed the distance in an instant, aiming to finish the fight. The scene shifts to a memory. Amidst the forest, a lone guard stood, facing a demon head-on. He wasn't one of the elite, lacking the symbolic silver armor of a knight. Instead, he wore simple, battered steel armor and common shoes. His determined gaze remained fixed on his foe. In the present, the demon Valencia recalls this moment, while a stunned Elda begins to protest, her voice catching as she tries to speak. Valencia's memory continues. The young guard then shouted some incomprehensible nonsense and swung his sword, dispatching the demon in a flash of steel. She inwardly dismisses the memory's relevance. It clearly lingers. Her thoughts drift back to that moment. Valencia touches her own cheek, lost in the recollection of his expression, musing that he was, by far, the most beautiful of all the knights she had ever seen. The perspective shifts to Captain Elda's own memories. She recalls that ever since that day, she has relentlessly tried to recruit him into the Holy Knights Order. Though he might deny it himself, she knows without a doubt that he is special. Her memory sharpens to a specific moment where she grabbed his tunic, her conviction clear. She felt then that he had been given a power specifically to protect their world. The narrative moves forward to the following day. A knight approaches Captain Elda at a crime scene, expressing his surprise that she came to investigate the attack in person. The knight reports his findings. He explains that they have 2 victims, and the perpetrator seems to be a cunning demon, as it left almost no traces. He suggests that they may need to call upon Sir Hero for this case. Elda absorbs the information, her expression serious. She confirms she understands and tells the knight to continue his report. She reveals that she has already asked someone to come, but they still don't know anything about their target, so the investigation remains their top priority. The knight elaborates on the grim details. Both victims were women, they have bite marks, and their blood appears to have been completely drained. He grimly speculates that the demon is likely over level 3. Considering the lack of evidence, Elda clenches her jaw, realizing how awful the situation is. Elsewhere, the demon Valencia relishes the chaos she has created. The aftermath of the demon's rampage is a scene of utter carnage. The bodies of fallen soldiers lie twisted and broken on the floor, their uniforms torn and their lives extinguished in a brutal display of power. Witnessing the devastation, Captain Elda's gloved hand clenches into a tight fist. As a knight addresses her, she seethes with silent fury before issuing a string of urgent commands. She orders all holy knights and soldiers to be put on high alert and for the scout regiment to expand its search range. Her final, specific order is for a messenger to find Gate Guard Silva and bring him to the Knights Order headquarters immediately. As they walk through a corridor flanked by armored guards, Elda Snow White leans in close to Charles, a playful glint in her eye. She declares her excitement for their first task together, calling him darling. Visibly flustered, Charles immediately tells her to stop using that phrasing. He internally laments his situation. Having been asked to investigate the recent demon attack, he feels he's gotten himself into a messy predicament, made worse by the fact that he'd already had a difficult time the previous day with Kaguya following him around. The narrative shifts back several hours. Charles agrees with Elda's assessment of the situation. She then brings up a key detail. The culprit is being called a vampire. She elaborates, explaining that vampire is a popular alias being used for the perpetrator behind the demon attack that occurred the other day. Continuing her briefing, Elda reports that there were 2 victims. Their bodies were discovered completely drained of blood, and both had bite marks on their necks. The scene snaps back to the present. Suddenly, Kaguya appears, snuggling against Charles's arm. Startled, he wonders what she is doing there. Kaguya simply smiles, stating that she does whatever she wishes. Nearby, Elda watches with clear annoyance, thinking to herself that this has nothing to do with Kaguya. In a flash of anger, Elda shoves Kaguya away from Charles with a loud thump, shouting for the lascivious wants to get away from him. She forcefully repeats her demand. Kaguya, however, remains unfazed, still holding onto Charles's arm as she innocently asks what is wrong with simply linking arms with him. Kaguya dismisses Elda's anger, calling the captain uptight and declaring that she is in the middle of a serious conversation right now. Visibly frustrated by the interruption, Elda tries to regain control of the situation. With a stern expression, she insists that no matter what, they must get back on track with their investigation. Continuing her briefing, Elda explains their current theory. The culprit behind the attacks is likely a demon that evolved from a bloodbath a creature believed to be level 3 or higher. Crucially, since its location is unknown, it must be capable of shape-shifting into a human form. She then turns to Charles, declaring that it's his time to shine. He processes the information, realizing he's being asked to face a level 3 demon, a threat that even 10 skilled knights would struggle against. Elda clarifies that she doesn't mind if he acts independently, so long as he helps with the investigation, noting that they are currently lacking manpower. Charles, however, expresses his doubt, stating that as a mere gate guard, he feels he's only capable of running errands. His demeanor shifts from self-doubt to suspicion. He stares intently at Elda, deciding he needs to ask something before proceeding. He narrows his eyes and directly questions her, asking if she has any ulterior motives. Her composure shatters instantly. Flustered, she laughs nervously and denies trying to set her great filling up the outer moat plan in motion. She quickly adds that she only hopes his success in the investigation will make it easier for her to invite him to join the Knight's Order. As she continues to laugh awkwardly behind her desk, Charles dryly points out that she just blurted out all the parts she was supposed to keep quiet. Despite her obvious scheming, Charles accepts the investigation. He reflects that, as it's an official order, he couldn't have turned it down anyway. Just as he agrees, Kaguya interjects, declaring that if Charles is helping, then she will help as well, much to Elda's shock. Elda slams her hands on the desk in protest, shouting that Kaguya's involvement will ruin her plan. Unfazed, Kaguya replies that she doesn't care about that. She simply wants to accompany Charles. Elda can only growl in frustration. Seeing no other choice, Elda relents with a sigh. She concedes that they can use all the help they can get. Regaining her composure, she formally instructs both Charles and Kaguya to attend the upcoming investigation meeting to be briefed on the situation. She followed as Charles knocked and slid open the door to a large room, announcing their presence. Kaguya trailed just behind them, her expression neutral as they stepped over the threshold. Their entrance immediately sparked a wave of chatter among the assembled knights. Murmurs spread, questioning who the unfamiliar man was and why a mere soldier was accompanied by the special-grade hero, Kaguya. Unfazed, Kaguya listened to the whispers with a faint, knowing smile, realizing this commotion was likely part of Captain Elda's plan. The sound of their collective confusion filled the spacious hall as the trio stood before the gathered ranks of the Knight's Order. At a large gathering, Kaguya approaches Charles and asks if she may sit beside him. Flustered by the attention from the special-grade hero, he quickly agrees. She thanks him and takes her seat. He internally reflects that she is the one truly standing out, not him. With a knowing smile, Kaguya chuckles softly, acknowledging that their presence together is indeed drawing attention. With everyone now settled around a large table, a knight in a position of authority calls the room to order. He announces the official start of the investigation meeting regarding the recent vampire attack. The knight begins by summarizing the known facts for the group. He states that they have 2 victims, both in their 20s, whose bodies were discovered in the northern part of the capital. As another knight curses the demons responsible, Charles listens with a look of intense concentration. A startling realization dawns on him. This attack case never existed in the main story of Brave Arms. He continues to process this deviation, concluding that because this is an unforeseen event, it will likely resolve itself without the involvement of the story's main characters. His train of thought is broken by a soft weight on his shoulder. He turns to see that Kaguya has fallen completely asleep, her head resting against him, prompting a quiet, surprised "oh" from him. Unaware of the situation, the meeting leader continues, summarizing the plan to expand their search range and establish a night patrol. He then assigns Charles and Kaguya to be in charge of the Eastern Gate. Hearing their assignment, Charles looks down at his partner. He whispers her name, but gets no response, marveling that she is still fast asleep. Despite this, he resolves that they should go investigate. He glances back at the sleeping Kaguya, his resolve faltering as the absurdity of the situation sinks in. A bead of sweat forms on his temple as he mutters in disbelief. Seriously, he is approached by a large, imposing knight who looks down with a stern expression, demanding to know which group he has been assigned to. Charles, caught off guard, stammers as he tries to formulate a reply. The knight continues his tirade, questioning Captain Elda's judgment for pairing a special-grade hero with a mere soldier. Charles calmly clarifies that he is part of the guard regiment of the Eastern Gate. As the knight bellows that Kaguya was supposed to team up with his unit, the Second Holy Knight's Order, Charles has an internal realization. He surmises the man is likely trying to steal credit for the mission from Captain Elda. The man leans in close, his face twisted with aggression as he accuses Charles of running his mouth. Unfazed, Charles coolly replies that he believes the decision is not the knight's to make. The knight then issues a direct order for Charles to withdraw from the investigation, declaring that the case is far beyond the capabilities of a common soldier. Charles attempts to state that he has orders from the captain of the First Holy Knight's Order, but the knight cuts him off, violently grabbing his armor. He shouts that his Second Holy Knight's Order will not be outdone, prompting one of his subordinates to nervously plead for him to stop. He shoves Charles back, turning to proclaim that as esteemed members of the Second Holy Knight's Order, they cannot allow the First Order to best them in any manner. As their leader rages, his 2 subordinates begin to tremble, urgently trying to get his attention. They cry out for him to look behind him. The knight turns with a confused glare, only to be met by a calm voice telling him to shut his trap. The voice belongs to Kaguya, now awake and floating in the air, radiating an intense, furious energy. Her eyes glow as she remarks on the knight's nerve for touching her darling. Behind her, Charles tries to de-escalate, insisting he's fine, but the knight is frozen in shock. Just as Kaguya's power filled the room, another force intervened with a loud crack. A sword, lunging towards Charles, was violently deflected just inches from his face. Stunned by the sudden, new intervention, he cried out, "Wait!" Kaguya, mistakenly believing she was responsible. He was mistaken. With a heavy thud, the leader of the Second Holy Knight's order crumpled to the floor. Standing over the down knight was Elda Snow White, her hand raised in a commanding gesture. "Stay back," she ordered coolly, her authority undeniable. With the knights who had accosted Charles now slumped in a defeated heap, Kaguya stands over them, a pleasant smile on her face. She clenches a fist, declaring with satisfaction, "The gall of you to lay your hands on my husband." Charles is utterly stunned, questioning aloud if the special grade hero truly just said that. In response, Kaguya winks playfully, apologizing for being bad at holding back. Nearby, Elda sighs in exasperation, muttering that Kaguya has really gone and done it this time. Sometime later, as he and Kaguya walk through the town, he asks her to please not use her magic so unexpectedly, complaining that it's bad for his heart. She, however, seems to be enjoying their time together, dreamily commenting on how romantic a night patrol is. He continues to press the issue, reminding her that the man she incapacitated had attacked him. Kaguya simply turns to him and asks if it isn't only natural for a wife to protect her husband. He concedes that she did save his skin, but maintains that she went too far. With a smug grin, she leans in close, asking why he isn't praising her for the protection she provided. She then observes that the look on his face suggests he's being doubtful of her. All he can do in response is let out a weary sigh. She continues, assuring him that she isn't lying about her love for him. She mentions his tendency to take care of others and admits how much fun she finds it to tease him. Her expression softens as she elaborates, telling him she loves the true strength he keeps hidden from others. And chief of all, she loves everything about him. He turns away, flustered, muttering that he doubts a chance to go all out would ever come. Kaguya gently places a hand on his shoulder, insisting that someday she wants to see it. He is left to ponder her words, that responsibility is part and parcel of being strong. As he mulls this over, Kaguya floats away with a light laugh, saying she doesn't know about that. Charles can only mutter the word to himself. Responsibility. He stands beside Kaguya as she gazes up at the starry sky, her long hair flowing in the night breeze. She turns her head slightly towards him, calling his name Silva, and remarks that the moon is beautiful tonight. Her words, carrying a deeper, unspoken meaning, catch him by surprise. His eyes widen slightly as he processes her statement. He asks about the sudden, poetic observation. Kaguya then looks at him intently, posing a hypothetical question. If she were to claim that she was born from the moon, would he believe her? The question triggers a stark understanding within him. He knows the truth of what Kaguya is, not a child of the moon, but a chosen vessel for secretive research, a project designed to harvest magic from the moon itself. This hidden truth brings tears to Kaguya's eyes. She whispers that the moon's magic is what turned her into the strongest, her voice trembling. Seeing her vulnerability, Charles looks at her directly and answers without hesitation, "Yes, I would." His simple, unwavering belief stops her tears. A look of surprise washes over her face, quickly replaced by a bright, relieved smile. "Thank you," she says, followed by a soft laugh. "So you believe me?" He elaborates with a gentle smile, explaining that the idea of her coming from the moon would simply make it more romantic. The word romantic strikes Kaguya with unexpected force. She freezes, her face flushing as she repeats the word in a daze, utterly flustered. Her composure returns in a flash of playful energy. She brightens, accusing him of emotional abuse for teasing his wife in such a way. He quickly retorts that she isn't his wife, but she delightedly points out that he's being sheepish for once. Despite his outward denial, an internal thought trails off in his mind. The word she used, he feels it is misplaced. Kaguya confirmed she sensed it as well. As Charles called out her name, a piercing scream echoed from nearby. He reacted without hesitation, pulling her aside just as a blur of motion shot past them. The scent was now overwhelming, and a chilling recognition dawned on him. Before he could voice his realization, a low growl rumbled from Kaguya. Her usual demeanor vanished, replaced by a feral intensity as she glared into the darkness where two shadowy figures stood. With utter disgust, she identified the source, the filthy scent of demons. In a dark, stone-paved alley, Charles and Kaguya discover a woman lying unconscious on the ground. A cloaked figure looms over her. Enraged, Charles shouts, demanding to know what the figure is doing, and immediately dashes forward to intervene. The figure reacts with startling agility, leaping away and scaling a nearby wall in a single bound. Charles stops short, stunned by the creature's speed, and curses as it begins to escape. He turns his attention to the fallen woman. calling out to see if she is all right. Kneeling beside her, he feels a wave of relief wash over him. He confirms that she is, thank goodness, still breathing. Looking up at Kaguya, he quickly forms a plan. He asks her to take the woman to the medical office, declaring that he will go after the demon himself. She agrees without hesitation, but asks with a hint of concern if he can manage the pursuit by himself. Charles reassures her, telling her not to worry and to leave the demon to him. With that settled, he focuses his energy, activating a magical enhancement that courses through his body. He leaps powerfully from the ground, landing on a nearby rooftop, and immediately spots his fleeing target in the distance. He dashes across the rooftops in hot pursuit. As the demon prepares to leap away again, Charles yells out, determined not to let it get away. His chase is abruptly halted. A horde of bloodbats materializes from the darkness, flapping their wings and blocking his path, much to his surprise. The bats swarm him, forcing him to fend them off. He grunts in frustration, realizing with annoyance that the cursed demon can summon its own minions. This chase has just become a significant pain. While Charles is occupied with the swarm, Kaguya watches from below. A sudden realization strikes her as she observes the bats' coordinated attacks. She recognizes the technique, Valencia's sword style. Ignoring the swarm of bats for a moment, Charles lunges forward with a powerful, wild thrust, closing the distance to the masked demon. He believes he has finally cornered his quarry, but the demon is startled by the sudden, direct attack. As the confrontation unfolds, the unconscious woman he is trying to protect remains motionless on the cold ground. The demon uses the momentary distraction to flee, leaving its swarm of bloodbats to intercept Charles. The young guard shouts in frustration as his target escapes, realizing the annoying creatures are now his immediate problem. Resigned, he prepares for battle, his sword beginning to emit a soft glow. With a vicious lunge, Silva stabs into the shadowy, bat-like form of the demon. The creature shrieks as it is impaled, but a part of it whips around, forcing Silva to cry out as he recoils. The main body of the creature dissolves, but a single bat-like entity escapes into the night sky, silhouetted against the full moon. Below, Silva watches it go, realizing with frustration that it got away. His pursuit ends as the scene shifts to a quiet, lit building under the night sky, the clinic. Inside, Kaguya greets a seated Silva, asking if he returned empty-handed. He apologizes, confirming the creature escaped, but reports that he has no injuries. More importantly, he adds, he managed to save a life, noting that the hemantic had worked. She tells him not to beat himself up over it. He looks down, admitting it was a mistake to give chase alone. A sense of relief washes over him as he seems to recall the life he saved, murmuring that he is glad. His resolve hardens as he looks up, clutching a piece of cloth and vowing to catch the creature next time. Kaguya notes that the cloth could be a lead and reassures him. If the creature could evade even him, she doubts anyone else could have caught it. Seeing his renewed spirit, Kaguya playfully calls his motivation lovely. Flustered, Silva turns away, asking her to stop. Later, the search for the demons continues fruitlessly, perhaps because they are being guarded. It is understood that these starved demons will likely commit another crime soon, making their capture imperative to prevent further casualties. As Kaguya walks ahead humming, Silva examines his only lead, a piece of cloth stained with the demon's blood. From a rooftop above, the hooded girl keeps a silent watch over them. He decides to take a chance. Holding out the blood-stained fabric, he calls to Kaguya, asking her to try and smell it, hoping this long shot might work. He holds out the piece of cloth, reminding Kaguya that she was able to recognize the scent of demons before. He asks if she can use that ability to trace them back to their source. Kaguya looks at him, startled by the request. She smiles wryly, clarifying that while it's true she is sensitive to their scent, her nose isn't sharp enough to actively hunt for them. She reminds him that she is not a dog. In the background, Silva remains hopeful, telling her he's counting on her sharp senses. As Kaguya begins to add a caveat, Silva slumps in frustration, believing his great idea has been shot down. Her demeanor then shifts entirely. With a determined smile and newly sprouted cat ears, she declares that if it is his wish, she will do everything in her power to fulfill it, proclaiming it her duty as a wife. She even offers to transform into a cat or a dog for him. Her zealous offers escalate to licking his shoes or even taking off her clothes, causing Silva to panic. He shouts her name, begging her to stop and saying he'll apologize. Their chaotic exchange is interrupted by a young woman calling out, "Charlie." It is Charles Orland, who asks what he is doing there. She explains she was looking for him because she aced her written tests and wanted him to praise her. At the sight of a newcomer, Kaguya's playful demeanor vanishes. She eyes the other woman and asks who this young missy might be. Internally, Silva realizes with dread that Kaguya is becoming caught up in a rivalry. The woman introduces herself as Charlie, a friend of Silva's. Kaguya hesitantly introduces herself in return. Charlie's eyes widen in recognition, and she asks in disbelief if Kaguya is the special grade hero. Charlie expresses her amazement, which Silva enthusiastically echoes, congratulating Charlie on her test results. She explains that as a student of the Heroes Academy, she would naturally know of Kaguya. Silva reflects on this rare event. In the original story, these two never met. He notes Charlie's composure in the face of a figure who should be out of her league. Charlie, in turn, tells Kaguya she is honored and sees great potential in her. A young woman with a hooded jacket leans forward, her expression intent as she directly questions the nature of someone's relationship with Silva. Her question is met with a shocking revelation. She reels back, asking if Silva wasn't single, as another woman, Kaguya, appears and dramatically declares herself to be his wife, the most fragile, demure, and beautiful in the world. Silva, standing nearby, is visibly distressed by the proclamation. He panics internally, realizing he must clear up this misunderstanding immediately. From a short distance, Charlie Orland observes the unfolding drama, noting that Silva is getting caught up in a rivalry and questioning if she herself is feeling jealous. Turning to Charlie, Silva hastily tries to explain the situation. He insists that Kaguya is merely a friend and that they are currently business partners. He emphasizes that her claim of being his wife is entirely her own self-proclamation. He continues, changing the subject slightly, to inform her that they will be going on patrols together to investigate the recent case of vampire attacks. Overhearing their plan, the hooded girl interjects, offering to help with the investigation as well. She adds that news of the vampire case is already spreading throughout the academy. She then pouts slightly, wondering aloud why he emphasized the friend part of his description. With a polite but challenging smile, Charlie asks what the hooded girl could possibly do to contribute. In response to the challenge, the girl claps her hands together, initiating a spell. A bright light glows from the ground as she calls for her master to appear before them. A massive, glowing form of a wolf erupts into existence as she commands it to appear. Kaguya watches from the side, remarking that it is an interesting summoning spell. The summoned creature, a wolf spirit named Fenrir, affectionately licks its summoner's face. She explains that she calls him Ru for short and that her elemental magic allows her to summon her contracted spirits at any time. She explains that elemental magic is an omnipotent skill, useful for both battle and exploration. Silva, looking at the massive wolf, remarks that its name, Ruru, is quite cute. The spirit simply lets out a soft woof in response. As he reaches out a hand toward the spirit, the hooded girl expresses her disbelief. She explains that Riru has been by her side since she was a child and has never warmed up to anyone else besides her. He gently touches the wolf's snout, internally recalling that even Alan was only able to touch Riru after his intimacy with the girl, Charlie, had reached its maximum. This immediate acceptance is unprecedented. The wolf spirit responds with pure delight, rolling onto its back and exposing its belly. Charlie exclaims how cute it is, as Silva happily rubs the massive creature's stomach. Witnessing this, Kaguya attempts to approach, but Riru immediately becomes guarded, growling defensively. Kaguya puffs her cheeks, thinking it a very rude dog for not accepting her. Charlie, however, giggles, explaining that this is Riru's usual behavior, that Silva is a special case. Setting aside the introductions, Silva brings their attention back to the mission. He holds up a piece of cloth, asking if Riru can use its scent to follow the demon. Charlie confirms that Riru can indeed sniff out and track demons, making the task easy once it has a clue. He presents the cloth to the wolf. Riru sniffs it intently before letting out an affirmative bark and nodding its head. Charlie observes the reaction, realizing the spirit has found something. With the scent acquired, Silva takes command. He addresses Charlie and Kaguya, giving the order to move. "We're chasing him," he declares, ready to begin the pursuit. Under the cover of darkness, the group arrives at a secluded compound of wooden buildings, their target now in sight. The massive spirit wolf, Riru, stands at the forefront of the party as Charles, Kaguya, and Charlie assess the situation from the edge of the woods. Kaguya breaks the silence, turning to Charles to ask what their plan is and whether they should all infiltrate the compound together. Noticing a small opening, she asks if that's where Riru emerged from, prompting a loud, affirmative bark from the wolf. He clarifies that it won't be a full infiltration. Only he and Charlie will go inside, while Kaguya is to stand guard outside. Kaguya, her expression softening with concern, asks if the two of them will be all right on their own. Her concern gives way to a flicker of annoyance as she reminds him that despite all his previous efforts, he still allowed their target to escape. He meets her gaze with a confident smile, acknowledging her point. He confirms that he is well aware of that fact, and it is precisely why he needs her to remain outside. He elaborates, explaining that her power is a bit too overwhelming for a close-quarters mission. He points out that she isn't suited for such fights, and that he and Riru need to infiltrate while someone reliable keeps guard. The thoughtful consideration behind his words dawns on her, and a blush spreads across her face. She murmurs that he seems to know her quite well. Her realization quickly blossoms into overwhelming joy, causing her to float into the air. "I'm so happy," she exclaims. "Is this love?" A flustered Charles immediately refutes the idea. Undeterred by his denial, she gracefully composes herself and agrees to his plan, declaring that she will follow his instructions in order to respond to his love. As the infiltration mission commenced, Charles's expression hardened with resolve. He confidently declared that he wouldn't let a single enemy slip past them. Hearing this, Charlie suggested that Riru, the spirit wolf, should take the lead. Charles beamed, calling the idea dependable, and Riru let out an affirmative bark. His demeanor then shifted back to serious focus. He turned to Charlie, instructing her to stay behind him. The pair, along with the wolf, advanced towards the entrance of a large, rustic building. Pausing at the threshold, Charles glanced back, his hand on his sword, and asked if they were ready to proceed. They slipped inside. The interior was a dark, wooden corridor, and Riru immediately took point, sniffing the floorboards as they moved cautiously into the shadows. As they crept forward, a sudden, heavy thud echoed from the darkness ahead, causing both of them to freeze in alarm. The unexpected noise startled Charlie, who gasped and instinctively grabbed onto the strap of Charles's armor. With a blush, she apologized, admitting she had gotten a bit scared. Her sudden closeness caught him completely off guard. His heart began to pound as a deep blush spread across his face. He tried to compose himself, internally reasoning that it was understandable for her to be anxious, as she was still just a student at the Heroes Academy. But as he struggled with his composure, Charlie tightened her grip. A faint, content smile played on her lips as she reveled in the moment, thinking to herself that she must be dreaming to be this close to her favorite heroine. The moment was shattered. Charles, snapping out his flustered state, saw that Riru had stopped ahead of them. The wolf was barking insistently into the darkness, sensing danger. "What's wrong, Riru?" he called out, his attention now fully on the unseen threat. He stared into the oppressive darkness ahead, sensing the unseen threat was close. "Charlie, stand back," he commanded, placing a hand on her shoulder. She complied with a simple, "Okay," her expression tense. Before them, Riru remained fixated on the dark doorway, a low growl rumbling in its chest. From the shadows, a figure in a dark robe lunged forward, its hand clamping down on Charlie's hood with a sickening grip. As the assailant pulled her away, Charles's eyes widened in recognition. He was certain of it now. He knew that robe. The robed assailant violently tossed Charlie aside, her body hitting the ground with a dull thud. Before she even landed, the figure spun and launched itself directly at Charles, claws extended. As the attack closed in, a strange feeling washed over him. Something felt slightly off, but he couldn't tell if it was just his imagination. On the floor, Silva braces himself as the imposing figure of Valencia lunges, clawed hand outstretched. Recognizing the familiar sword style, Silva resolves to end the fight here and now, a determined glint in his eyes. He explodes into motion, evading the attack and countering with his own. Leaping into the air, he unleashes a powerful technique, roaring upper slash, as his blade connects in a brilliant arc of energy. The impact sends Valencia staggering backward, collapsing to the ground with a heavy thud. Silva lands and stares, his expression one of pure shock at the sudden outcome. He looks down at his defeated opponent, who lies motionless. A question forms in his mind, a seed of doubt about the confrontation. Was Valencia truly meant to be this weak? His contemplation is broken by a voice from a nearby doorway. Charles Orland peeks in, asking if he managed to take the enemy down. She steps closer, praising his incredible slash. Silva seems to agree absent-mindedly, saying he won somehow, but then quickly becomes flustered by the compliment, insisting it was nothing that amazing. His embarrassment vanishes as a faint rustling sound catches his attention. Charles Orland notices his sudden alertness and asks if he also hears something. He confirms that he does, and they agree to investigate the source. As they move through the area, she spots something hidden among a pile of crates. "Ah, over there!" she exclaims, pointing towards the disturbance. They cautiously approach the location, the rustling growing louder. The soft creak of a door being pushed open echoes through the storeroom. Peering past the last crate, both of them freeze, their eyes wide with disbelief at what they have found. "This is," Silva begins to say, utterly stunned. He stared into the storeroom, his shock giving way to grim understanding. Before him, several people were huddled together, bound and gagged, their muffled groans filling the small space. His gaze shifted from the captives to Charles Orland beside him, his voice low as he wondered aloud who these people could be. Before an answer could be given, a bright voice cut through the tension. Elda's Snow White appeared, her face beaming with pride. "Well done, Silva," she exclaimed, her tone full of genuine praise. Her praise was interrupted by another presence. Lady Kaguya materialized beside them, her expression thoroughly irritated. She reminded them she was also present, and before Silva could fully register the Miss Commander, Kaguya delivered a sharp smack to the side of his head. She stated she was impressed he'd rescued the captives on top of defeating the monster. Though her tone was far from congratulatory, Kaguya clicked her tongue in annoyance. Elda, however, simply turned to her with a grateful smile, acknowledging her contribution. "You did great too, Kaguya." "Thank you," she said. Silva, still reeling, tried to interject, but Elda was already speaking. She announced her intention to report to the higher-ups that Kaguya, Charles, and Gateguard Silva had safely resolved the vampire issue. Her words sent a jolt of panic through him. He pleaded with her not to tell them he was the one who took down the vampire, explaining his desire to avoid undue attention. Elda paused, looking at him with a curious expression. asking what was wrong. A sly smile spread across her face as she saw an opportunity. She saw no harm in his exploits becoming known. In fact, it would just give her another reason to invite him to join the Knight's Order. Silva looked on in stunned silence. His silence broke in a torrent of panicked refusal. No, 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 he shouted, waving his hands defensively. He reminded her that she had promised to give up on asking him to join the order. She feigned ignorance, musing aloud if she had really said that. Then, with a loud cough to change the subject, she turned to walk away, announcing that she would give them all rewards worthy of their hard work. Silva could only point after her, insisting, "You did." He stands frozen, a bead of sweat on his face. The young guard realizes with dawning horror that he has not, in fact, escaped Elda's relentless recruitment efforts. His shock is prompted by Elda, who cheerfully hops forward, thrusting a heavy pouch towards him. She declares it his reward for slaying the vampire and rescuing the captives. Taking the pouch, his thoughts turn to the well-being of the rescued women. He asks what happened to them. Elda reassures him that they are all safe. She explains that since they were captured recently, they suffered no severe injuries and have already recovered. She speculates that the vampire likely intended to keep them as a reserve food supply. As he processes her words, a detail about the incident begins to trouble him. He falls into deep thought, a frown creasing his brow as he realizes something feels off. He finds it hard to believe that the vampire possessed enough intelligence to plan for keeping emergency food. The discrepancy is unsettling. He resolves that his next step should be to consult the church, which ought to possess extensive knowledge on the subject of vampires. His prolonged silence draws the attention of his companions. Elda calls out to him, trying to get his attention, while Kaguya waves a gloved hand in front of his face, asking with a hint of amusement what is wrong. Kaguya dismisses Charles, thanking him for his hard work and telling him he can leave. Flustered, Charles stammers that it was nothing. As he walks away from the gate, his expression is downcast and troubled. From the gatehouse, Kaguya and two other guards watch him depart. Suddenly, Elda's Snow White appears beside him, her face close to his. With a knowing smile, she asks if there is something bothering him. He is taken aback, surprised that she figured it out. Elda simply states that of course she would, reminding him that he is her husband. After all, he confirms her suspicion, explaining that he has a nagging feeling, as if he's still in the middle of processing something. Elda listens intently, encouraging him to elaborate. His face flushes as he tells her to stop teasing him. She chuckles, remarking that his expression when deep in thought is lovely and makes him look like a detective. She continues, noting that since they technically solved the case, she will return to replenishing her mana for now. With a playful glint in her eye, she says she prays that her lovely detective will reach his answer. He acknowledges her words as they begin to part ways. She tells him it's fine, as she was the one who asked to tag along, and apologizes for dragging him to various places for days on end. He tries to offer Elda her third of the reward, but she dismisses the money as a pittance she doesn't need, much to Kaguya's astonishment. Elda adds with a warm smile that just spending time with him was more than enough for her. As she walks away, she calls out a farewell to her cute husband and playfully asks if he's getting embarrassed. Red-faced, he mutters that he'd prefer she didn't say such things directly to him. He watches as Kaguya departs, her parting words a playful warning not to cheat on her. He calls after her, reminding her to use the proper entrance next time. As he walks along a high stone walkway, her use of the word cheating echoes in his mind. He soon arrives at the base of a set of stairs, calling up to the person waiting above with an apology for his tardiness. At the top of the stairs, Elda greets him with a warm smile, assuring him it's no trouble. He asks about Kaguya, and Elda explains that she had something to do and has already gone home. Charles acknowledges this with a simple, "I see." He then formally thanks Elda, crediting her for their success in solving the case. She brushes off the praise, stating that she was simply helping for her own benefit. Despite her earlier comment, she admits she is grateful, certain that his contribution to the vampire case will boost her grades at the Heroes Academy. As he clutches the pouch containing their reward, Charles internally reflects that seeing her pleased expression is a far better prize for him. His thoughts are interrupted when Elda suddenly declares that she doesn't need her share of the money, causing him to react with a startled "what?" When he asks for a reason, she explains that she merely located the demon. She has made a vow to herself not to accept any reward until she becomes a proper hero, capable of defeating demons with her own strength. Her declaration strikes a chord with him. Visibly moved, he praises her noble goal, internally admitting that this very quality is what he likes most about her. He eagerly taps the money pouch, offering to buy her anything she desires. Elda turns to him, a thoughtful look on her face, and states that while she won't take the money, there is something else she wants from him in exchange. She continued, her eyes closed and a faint blush on her cheeks as she apologized. The thing she desired, she explained, was not something that could be bought with money. As she began to elaborate, he could only scratch the back of his head in flushed confusion, completely failing to grasp her meaning. Leaning forward slightly with a determined yet shy expression, she finally revealed her request. "What I want," she stated, her voice soft but clear, "is time with you, Silva." In his room, Silva stares at his reflection with a look of sheer panic. He is preparing for his date, but finds himself completely paralyzed by indecision, wondering what he should do and what clothes he should possibly wear. Meanwhile, Charlie Orland daydreams with a soft, blissful expression. She can hardly believe she is about to go on a date with the one she admires most, the man she knows as Charlie, and she eagerly anticipates their time together. Back in his room, Silva hastily throws on a simple tunic, deciding it will have to suffice. Just as he does, a sharp knock sounds at his door, followed by the voice of his captain, Modi, asking if he wants to go grab a bite to eat. In a flash, Silva bursts out of the room, already running. He shouts a hurried apology to Modi, explaining that he's just noticed the time and is heading to a date, promising to join him another time. Modi is left standing in stunned silence. He stands there dumbfounded, his mouth agape as he processes the word. A date? He mutters to himself. After a moment, he seems to accept it, resigning himself to the fact that it can't be helped. As Silva rushes toward Fountain Square, his nerves begin to fray. He reflects on his past life as a corporate drone and realizes that even after being reincarnated, he has never once been on a date. The thought sends him into a panic, wondering what he should even say when he meets her. He continues to run, his face a mask of frantic determination. He internally shouts that this is a real date, not some formal arranged meeting. Spotting her in the distance, he calls out a greeting, loudly apologizing for being late. There, waiting in the square, is Charlie Orland. She is dressed in a beautiful, layered white dress with delicate straps and ribbons, a stunning departure from her usual attire. Silva's eyes widen as he takes in the sight of her. He stares, momentarily speechless. She greets him with a gentle morning, and in his flustered state, he misinterprets her soft expression, wondering for a second if she is crying. But as she reaches a hand out towards him, murmuring there, he realizes the tears are his own. Wiping his eye, he apologizes, admitting he was just overcome with happiness. He had never imagined he would see Charlie in her casual clothes in person, and the sight has moved him to tears. He clutches his chest, a wave of overwhelming emotion causing him to groan. He feels as if he has no regrets left in his life, a sentiment so powerful it seems to drain him. Beside him, Charlie Orland observes his strange behavior with a concerned expression. Snapping back to reality, he exclaims that it was a close call, feeling as though he was about to pass on entirely. Charlie, still watching him, remarks with a mix of worry and jest that it looked like his very soul was leaving his body. After regaining his composure, he apologizes for startling her and offers a proper morning greeting. Charlie smiles warmly and wishes him good morning in return. He then asks what she would like to do for the day. Charlie's face lights up as she explains that she wants to go shopping and also visit a new cafe that has recently opened. Silva readily agrees, assuring her he'll go wherever she wants. With their plans decided, the two begin their date, walking side by side through the bustling city streets. Their shopping trip begins in a clothing store, where Charlie happily twirls while looking at dresses. Watching her, Silva gives an enthusiastic thumbs up, clearly enjoying her delight. After making their purchases, they approach the counter, with Silva already carrying several shopping bags. Soon, he is laden with bags, yet he walks with a cheerful expression. Beside him, Charlie looks content, clutching a folder to her chest. Their shopping spree concluded, they arrive at their next destination. The new cafe Charlie had mentioned, its charming sign hanging over the entrance. Seated inside with a warm drink between them, the light-hearted atmosphere shifts. Silva looks at her earnestly and quietly asks, Charlie, of all people, why did you invite me on a date? In response to his question, Charlie leans forward, her expression turning serious. She confirms that she wanted to discuss something with him, admitting that a particular matter has been bothering her lately. She explains that it has been a while since they've had a chance to talk alone. Their party leader, Alan, is a constant presence, and though they must form parties and attend lessons at the Heroes Academy, his behavior is the root of the problem. Her gaze drifts downward, her discomfort palpable as she confesses that Alan's conduct is making her feel deeply uncomfortable. She reveals that Alan has been flirting with other members of the party every day and has also been making passes at her. The revelation shocks Silva, who internally questions if Alan is the one bothering her and whether he is actually dating these other people. The pieces click into place for him, drawn from his past life's knowledge. A dreadful thought occurs to him. Alan might be attempting to pursue a harem route in this world, a path he remembers from the game as being exceptionally difficult. His mind floods with the game's strict mechanics for such a path. He recalls that dating one person mid-game leads to immediate failure, as all potential partners reject the player. Success requires meticulously raising every heroine's affection level equally and clearing all their confession events at the exact same time. He grimly realizes Alan is already failing, having clearly lost affection points with Charlie. While Silva analyzes the situation through the lens of the game, Charlie continues her explanation. She states that while she has faith in Alan as a comrade, the act of pursuing another girl while already having a lover makes her feel sick. She adds that he frequently asks her out on dates, but she always refuses. Despite her rejections, he remains pushy. Silva can only sympathize with her difficult position. Charlie trails off, covering her mouth as if about to say more. The conversation strikes a chord with Silva, who covers his face, internally apologizing to her. He feels a pang of guilt, remembering all the times he himself pursued that very same harem route in his previous life. His strange, pained reaction leaves Charlie looking at him with silent, embarrassed confusion. Noticing her expression, Silva quickly backtracks, claiming it was nothing, even as his mind screams with curiosity about what she was going to say. As he remains lost in his thoughts, Charlie sighs, remarking that the heart of a maiden is complicated. She adds that she has secrets she can't even share with him, her gaze distant. Her words send a jolt through him. He realizes with shock that her secret might be her feelings for him, a possibility he finds unbelievable. The realization causes him to fall backward out of his chair with a loud clatter. Startled, Charlie calls out his name, Charles, asking what's wrong. Before he can respond, a new voice cuts in. Alan, the very subject of their earlier concerns, stands before them with two other women, Margaret Narfis and Rena Cassius, both identified as heroine candidates. With a smug grin, Alan greets them. Charlie, completely flustered, asks Alan, Margaret, and Rena what they're doing there. Alan casually drapes his arms around his companions and announces that they are on a date. He then adds with a wide, oblivious smile that they had even invited Silva to join them the other day, completely unaware of the tension his arrival has created. Charlie's expression sours. Having returned to his seat, Silva calmly takes a sip from his cup, observing the scene. He internally concludes that these must be the two girls Alan is currently dating. His mind flashes back to his knowledge of the game's plot. He recalls that Rena and Margaret are heroines who are considered easy to conquer. In fact, they actively support the protagonist's efforts to form a harem, even helping him find new girls. He considers the social structure of the academy, where changing party members is difficult. The thought of being trapped in such an awkward environment with Alan's group makes him deeply uncomfortable. As Silva stews in his thoughts, Alan gestures toward him and turns to Charlie. Completely oblivious, he asks her who Charles is. In response to Alan's question, Charlie states with a weary expression that she and Silva are also on a date. From his seat, Silva humbly introduces himself as a mere gatekeeper. As Silva sweats nervously, Alan's expression darkens. He senses an immense, overflowing mana emanating from the gatekeeper and internally questions the meaning of the situation. He lunges forward, grabbing Silva's tunic and shouting in disbelief. He demands to know why Charlie would refuse his own offer, only to go on a date with a man who looks like a common nobody. Charlie immediately objects, telling Alan he is being rude. Flustered, Charlie nearly calls Silva by his real name, Charles, before catching herself. She decides they should leave and tells Silva they will go somewhere else, ordering a stunned Alan not to follow them. As he watches them, Alan's shock twists into a bizarre conclusion. He reasons that since Charles is dating a commoner, that man must undoubtedly be a demon. Both Silva and Charlie turn back, completely bewildered by the accusation. He points dramatically, declaring his theory aloud. He accuses Silva of being the culprit behind recent kidnappings of women, claiming he plans to deceive and abduct Charlie. Margaret and Rena listen from nearby. Hearing this, Rena's eyes widen with excitement. She exclaims that it all makes sense now, as it's the only logical reason why Charlie would refuse Alan's offer. Margaret looks on, seemingly convinced by the flawed reasoning. Charlie cries out for them to stop, insisting she has not been brainwashed. Clutching her chest, she desperately asks why they fail to understand her feelings. Silva watches her, his expression hardening with concern as he thinks her name. Her plea only strengthens Alan's delusion. Convinced that Silva must have cast a powerful mind spell on her, he levels his spear. He roars that he won't stand for a wretched demon toying with his precious person, as Silva grits his teeth in frustration. Charlie shouts, no, as Margaret and Rena urge her to leave with them. But Alan is lost in his fantasy, pitying the poor girl and her supposed brainwashing. From her seat, Charlie weakly tries to tell him he's wrong, but her voice is unheard in the chaos. The chaotic confrontation is filtered through Silva's thoughts. He reflects on the protagonist he once admired, wondering if Alan had always been such a pathetic jerk. As this bitter realization dawns, his hand clenches, and the teacup he holds shatters from the pressure. His internal turmoil conjures a jarring image. A menacing, masked figure looms, causing Alan and Margaret to react with alarm, their cries questioning the presence of Silva in this vision. The vision fades, returning to the present where Rena and Margaret struggle to restrain a furious Alan. He bellows at Silva, calling him a demon. Silva, however, remains utterly composed, internally dismissing Alan as a thick-skulled bonehead. He turns his attention as Charlie calls his name. Alan interrupts, annoyed that Silva is speaking up after he himself had considered staying quiet. Silva simply offers a wry smile, ruffling his own hair and apologizing to Charlie, admitting that Alan had pushed his buttons. Positioning himself protectively before Charlie, he faces Alan's group. He states with unwavering resolve that he cannot hand Charlie over to them, especially considering Alan's current state. His defiance fuels Alan's rage. The spearman glares, his eyes wide with fury, shouting that he doesn't need Silva's permission. Beside him, Margaret's expression sours with annoyance at her companion's escalating aggression. A shadow crosses Silva's face as his eyes narrow. Fine by me, he murmurs, accepting the challenge just as Alan declares his intent to take Charlie by force and lunges forward with his spear. In that instant, a memory flashes through Silva's mind, a cheerful Alan with his arm around a smiling Charlie. He realizes with a pang of regret that the Alan he once knew would have understood how Charlie felt. His resolve hardens. He has no intention of denying the reality of the aggressive Alan standing before him. However, he thinks to himself, there's one thing about this new persona that he simply cannot forgive. Meanwhile, Charlie watches the confrontation with a knowing, almost sly smile. She thinks to herself that she'll be damned if she lets a certain scenario unfold, hinting at a hidden agenda of her own. Silva's eyes blazed with a sharp, unwavering resolve. He internally vowed that he would never allow a reality where Charlie couldn't smile to come to pass. This conviction was rooted in a memory from his past life, where a more casual version of himself had confidently promised a blushing Charlie that he would personally handle her problems. In the present, however, this very confidence only served to enrage Alan. The guard snarled, calling Silva a cocky demon and vowing to rip him apart with his sword. In response to the threat, Silva's hand tightened into a fist. A menacing grin spread across his face as he warned Alan not to underestimate a man who had been a troublesome nerd, even in his past life. The two stood poised, the space between them crackling with hostility. Within the expansive training grounds of the Heroes Academy, a small group has gathered, the stage set for a confrontation. As they stand assembled, Brajo addresses Silva, expressing his surprise that Silva would choose this particular place for their dispute. He smirks, warning Silva that he will come to regret this decision. Silva, gripping his weapon, retorts that this is a place where he can finally unleash his full power without concern for his surroundings. As the tension mounts, Charlie turns to Silva with a guilt-ridden expression, apologizing profusely and blaming herself for getting him into this mess. His face hardens with resolve. He tells her that she has nothing to apologize for, declaring with fury that the one who truly needs to apologize is Alan. She insists he's done nothing wrong. Nearby, Brajo impatiently urges Alan to hurry up and defeat Silva so they can continue their date, boasting that Alan's skill can easily wipe out a lowly demon like him. Brajo's gloating continues as his hands glow with anticipation. He reveals his ultimate goal. Once this battle is over, Charles will inevitably fall in love with his strength again. Charlie watches him, her expression hardening. Overhearing this, Silva's eyes narrow in a cold fury. He internally swears that he will beat Brajo and make him apologize directly to Charlie. Charlie turns back to him, admitting that this is why she wants him to win. She anxiously warns him that Alan is incredibly strong, but promises to root for him. With a confident thumbs up, Silva assures her to leave it all to him. He steps forward, sword drawn, and declares, "Bring it on." Across the field, Alan takes his stance, mockingly asking the Gatekeeper if he's ready and if he's sure he wants to fight with such shabby gear. The spearman clicks his tongue in annoyance. Unfazed, Silva retorts that his current gear is more than enough to take him on. In response, Alan bellows, "Keep dreaming," and lunges, his spear slashing through the air. But Silva dodges the strike with surprising speed, leaving Alan to stare in disbelief. His shock is still visible as Silva instantly closes the distance between them. The young guard drives his fist into Alan's jaw with a solid crack. The force is unexpected, and Alan grunts that the punch packs a surprising kick. The impact sends Alan sliding backward across the training ground. He digs his heels in, wondering if Silva used some form of magic enhancement to achieve that strength. He glares with newfound intensity, realizing his opponent is no ordinary gatekeeper. As if reading his thoughts, Silva casually tosses his sword aside. With a sigh, he states that he is, as he said, just a gatekeeper. The act of disarmament confuses Alan, who demands to know what he's trying to pull. A confident grin spreads across Silva's face as he cracks his knuckles. He declares that for an opponent of Alan's current level, his bare hands are sufficient. Enraged by the insult, Alan roars at him not to be underestimated. The enraged spearman lunges again, but Silva once more evades the attack. He closes in instantly, warning Alan to clench his teeth before landing another solid punch that sends him staggering. The force of the strike is overwhelming. Alan is thrown to the ground, his spear knocked from his grasp as he cries out in pain and disbelief. His swift defeat sends shockwaves through the onlookers. Charlie Orland and a young boy stare in disbelief, the boy shouting his denial. The boy exclaims that Alan was wiped out with a single strike, while Charlie can't believe he was sent flying so easily. Below them, Alan lies defeated on the ground, cursing his powerlessness as Silva stands over him, victorious. Seeing him down, Charlie desperately calls out from the sidelines, urging Alan to get himself together and casting a healing spell to give him solace. The healing magic, however, seems to affect Silva instead, who notes with a pleasant smile that it made him feel better. A moment of concern crosses his mind as he wonders if he was too rough on his opponent. His concern is short-lived. On the ground, a distraught Alan is helped to his feet by Charlie and the other boy, the sting of his loss clearly visible on his face. He pushes through the despair, a new fire igniting in his eyes. He declares that he needs to take Charles back, a statement that catches a surprised Charlie completely off guard. As Silva begins to speak, Charlie tries to interject and correct Alan's strange declaration, pointing out that she isn't his. But Alan furiously cuts her off. He roars for her to be silent, proclaiming that he and Charles are bonded by strong love. In his mind, Silva appears as a laughing, demonic figure. Fueled by this distorted image, Alan points forward and swears an oath to his fallen comrade that he will defeat this demon lord. Unfazed by the dramatic vow, Silva looks down with a confident smirk, coolly expressing his doubt about that outcome. He listens with a weary expression as Alan continues his fervent speech, declaring that he and his comrades are bonded by a strong love. Alan insists that their bond will never be broken, his face a mask of passionate conviction. The scene shifts to a memory, revealing the source of Alan's dramatic pronouncements. In the past, a younger Silva, Alan, and Charlie are gathered together, playing a video game. Charlie remarks on the passion in the game's dialogue, thinking Alan looks cool, while Silva notes that while the story is generic, he has a soft spot for classic tales. Alan, completely engrossed, urges his character onward. The memory fades, returning to the present confrontation. Snapping out of his thoughts, Silva points a finger directly at Alan, shouting at him to stop spouting such ridiculous lines and calling him a womanizer. Alan is taken aback, exclaiming in confusion. In response, Alan bellows that he is going to become a hero, offering it as his sole justification. Silva's face contorts with irritation, dismissing Alan's words as nonsensical hogwash. He presses on, his voice filled with desperate conviction, declaring that for his heroic journey to be complete, Charlie must be by his side. As he watches the spectacle, a quiet realization dawns on Silva. He understands that Alan is not merely being dramatic. The man genuinely doesn't grasp the reality of the situation. His focus then shifts entirely to Charlie. With renewed determination, Alan promises to rescue her immediately, calling for her to wait for him. Charlie, however, remains silent, her gaze fixed on the ground. She finally looks up, her expression serious, and attempts to interrupt his tirade, calling his name and asking him to listen. Before he can respond, she looks at him directly and states firmly that she has made up her mind. Alan looks back, a flicker of confusion on his face as he questions her. But it is not Charlie who speaks next. Another young woman suddenly appears, her expression resolute. She announces to a stunned Alan that, as of today, she is quitting his party. The declaration leaves him utterly speechless. He and the woman who had just quit his party both react with stunned disbelief, their mouths agape. Silva watches them, his expression calm and observant. This is in response to Silva telling Charlie that he has sorted out his feelings, musing that he can become a hero if he works hard enough, even if he leaves their party. The departing woman, however, is incensed, shouting at Silva, whom she calls Charles, to listen, accusing him of being brainwashed. Her accusation strikes a nerve with Alan, who furiously denies that they were being manipulated, insisting their party was supposed to have a deep bond. The woman remains resolute, unmoved by his outburst. His anger deflates in a stunned disbelief. Seeing his reaction, she simply tells him to give it a rest already. Unwilling to accept the situation, Alan turns his attention to Charlie, declaring that he will become lovers with her and the strongest hero. He dismisses the departing woman, stating he knew it wouldn't work out with her. With a fierce cry, he activates a spell, Soul Bond. A crackle of energy erupts from him, striking Charlie, who cries out his name in alarm. While she's clearly distressed, Alan's face is alight with a manic grin. From a short distance, Silva observes the true nature of the Soul Bond. A sinister energy flows from both Charlie and the other woman, feeding directly into Alan, whose face is a mask of furious concentration as he feels his own mana being drained. He finally understands. The Soul Bond is a spell that converts the bond with one's comrades into special mana. Its power is determined by two factors: how many comrades are close to the user, specifically referred to as lovers in the spell's logic, and the depth of those bonds. The more lovers one has, the stronger it gets. Silva realizes that Alan's decision to learn this spell was the reason he needed to gather more comrades and deepen his bond with them. The realization brings a look of cold contempt to Silva's face. He murmurs that Alan is truly irredeemable. Even his fixation on Charlie was nothing more than a means to strengthen his spell. He sees a reflection of his own past in Alan's actions, remembering when he first played the game and chose the wrong path. As he contemplates this, a blast of energy streaks past him. The departing woman shouts a warning, telling Silva to be careful and noting Alan's incredible level of mana. He turns, his expression hardening as he reflects that while a game allows for infinite retries, real life offers no such luxury. Despite the stakes, he states with confidence that he will wrap this up in no time. As he looks up, Alan, still suspended by his power, shouts his ambition to become the strongest hero who will save everyone. Silva quietly questions this notion of saving. From the ground, the female party member mocks Alan, calling him a hero for making a girl sad while claiming he wants to save people. Alan roars in frustration, demanding to know what Silva could possibly understand about his ambition. He insists that he needs everyone's power to achieve his goal of becoming the strongest. Silva, his expression resolute, calmly replies that he does, in fact, understand. His resolve solidifies. He internally acknowledges that as a resident of this world and a fan of a certain playstyle, he won't deny Alan's methods. However, he vows to make Alan pay dearly for hurting his favorite. He readies his blade, preparing to unleash a Valencia sword-style secret technique. He swings his sword, unleashing the technique. Blue sky. A brilliant arc of energy cuts through the air, racing from his blade. The slash whistles through the space between them. The technique connects with a blinding flash. The force of the impact sends both Alan and the female party member hurtling backward through the air. Lying on the ground, Alan stares up in shock. Silva stands over him, calmly advising him to try and understand people's feelings a little. Defeated, Alan can only stammer about his soul bond. With the confrontation over, he kneels, his head bowed in exhaustion, his sword resting on the ground beside him. He looked up from the ground, his expression weary. A profound sense of disappointment settled in his thoughts. "You've greatly disappointed me," he mused internally, his mind fixed on the self-proclaimed hero, Alan. In the distance, the defeated guard could only stand and let out a heavy. A young woman storms onto the training yard, shouting at Silva and Alan, demanding to know what they are doing. Flustered, Alan addresses her as Miss Reeve and questions why she is there on her day off. The name Reeve feels familiar to Silva. He recalls it from a game he once played, but remembers the character being cut from the final version, wondering if this could be the same person. Before he can dwell on it, Alan stammers an explanation to Miss Reeve, pointing at Silva and declaring their suspicion that he is a demon. Her expression turns serious. She brings a hand to her chin, thoughtfully repeating Alan's accusation. "A demon, you say?" Silva immediately and forcefully refutes the claim, shouting that he is no demon and guaranteeing it. Just then, a new figure appears, the captain of the elite Knights Order, Elda Snow White. She addresses Silva, stating she was drawn there by a surge of incredible mana, and is surprised to find him as its source, noting that he seems to be in some trouble. He looks at her, a bead of sweat on his face, and asks what the commander is doing there. He thinks to himself that her line about him being in trouble is exactly what he was about to say to her. She explains with a confident smile that she has come to the academy for a meeting about the upcoming combat practicals. The Order of Knights will attend as a precaution in case anything unforeseen should happen. Silva nods, understanding. In the game, Silva remembers, these practicals, where hero candidates are meant to fight low-level demons, take a dark turn when they are ambushed by powerful level 3 demons. This knowledge weighs on his mind. He looks on with a pensive expression, realizing that this upcoming event will be Alan's first real battle. In his mind's eye, he sees Alan and Brajo locked in combat. He is met with a bright smile from Elda Snow White, who cheerfully asks if it's truly admirable for him to treat a hero candidate in such a manner. She playfully nudges him, remarking that bullying the weak isn't his style. As Alan struggles to his feet, looking utterly defeated, Silva stammers, unable to form a response, while Alan internally questions if he made a mistake. His humiliation quickly turns to rage. As he begins to run, Alan shouts back a vow to end Silva one day with his own hands. Elda watches him go, musing that this is the last thing a protagonist should say. He doesn't slow down, yelling for them to wait as he flees into the nearby woods. With Alan gone, Elda leans in close to a sweating Silva. She observes that a lot seems to have happened, and that Alan now appears to hate him a great deal. Her expression then shifts. A realization dawns on her, as she turns to Reeve, who has been standing nearby, asking directly if she is, perhaps, Charles. Elda continues, explaining to a surprised Reeve that she's heard a lot about her from Silva, especially regarding her help with the vampire case. When Reeve asks how she knows her name, Elda counters by asking if she's also a student at the Heroes Academy. Reeve confirms this, adding that Silva is a great help to her. With a confident smile, Elda declares that as far as she is concerned, Silva is the strongest soldier she knows, and that being with him will help Reeve grow significantly in skill. Reeve smiles warmly in agreement. The high praise makes Reeve clear her throat with a slight blush, while Silva scratches his head in embarrassment. Elda lets out a hearty laugh, declaring that the young woman has good judgment. Their light-hearted moment is cut short by the arrival of Margaret Narfis. She apologizes for the interruption, but informs the group that it is time for her and Elda to hold their meeting. As the meeting concludes, Elda Snow White offers a quick apology for the commotion before turning to leave. She bids farewell to Reeve and Silva, who stands with a hand on his head, sheepishly apologizing for the trouble he has caused. She pauses mid-stride, the word trouble echoing in her mind. A mischievous idea seems to strike her as she turns back, dismissing his concern by declaring it was no trouble at all. Her playful demeanor vanishes. Pointing a commanding finger at Silva, she declares that he must indeed atone for selfishly causing a scene. As a penalty, she orders him to participate in the combat practicals of the Heroes Academy, adding with a booming laugh that he has no right to refuse. Silva is left utterly stunned by the decree. The unexpected command leaves him speechless, his mind reeling in confusion. Moments later, after Elda has departed, Reeve turns to Silva. She apologizes for involving him in so much trouble, though she concedes that since he was trespassing, perhaps it was unavoidable. He reassures her immediately, telling Charlie that there is nothing to be sorry for, as he made his choices of his own free will. His expression softens as he continues, telling her he is genuinely glad for her. He explains that with this turn of events, she can now leave the party without any regrets. As Reeve quietly wonders if her dream of becoming a hero will come true, Silva has a different line of thought. He concludes that by leaving, Charlie has completely stepped down from her role as the heroine of the main story, and he doubts she will have much to do with the main plot moving forward. He puzzles over this concept of a main story. He finds it impossible to imagine a future where she doesn't appear in the plot at all, wondering if her removal means she won't get deeply involved in the coming dangers. A hopeful realization strikes him. If she's no longer part of the central narrative, then perhaps the events of that narrative wouldn't affect her. He glances at Reeve, a subtle, knowing smile forming as he considers the possibility. He watches as Reeve thanks him, a gentle smile on her face. Internally, however, Silva is in turmoil, chastising himself. He believes he should be content just to have his favorite character, Charlie, near him, yet he finds himself thinking of something else entirely. She continues, her voice filled with a newfound resolve. She tells him that because of his influence, she has found the strength to pursue her dream of becoming a hero, even if she must do it alone. She adds that if she were to become a full-fledged hero, she leans in close, her face flushed, and looks directly into his eyes. When that happens, she begins, her voice soft, will you? The rest of her question is left unspoken, hanging between them. Their moment is shattered by the sound of a child crying loudly. Silva and Reeve's attention snaps toward a small, spiky-haired boy standing alone and sobbing. As they approach, Reeve gently asks if he is all right and where his mother and father are. The boy, clutching his arm, can only choke out that they are not here. Silva then asks the boy where his house is. The child looks up at them and explains that he no longer has a mother or father, and that his home is the church. The simple, tragic statement leaves Silva momentarily speechless. The boy continues his story, explaining that he had been at the priest's residence, playing outside with a group of other children. Silva pieces it together, realizing the boy must have been separated from his friends. The child confirms this, sadly noting that the others all went off somewhere, leaving him behind. Looking from the lost child to Silva, Reeve proposes that they should take him to the church. Silva nods in agreement. Crouching down to the boy's level, Silva asks for his name. The child shyly replies, Addie. With a kind smile, Silva offers to take him home, asking if Addie would like to ride on his back. The boy's face lights up with a surprised blush. With Addie now perched happily on his back, Silva walks through the town streets, Reeve keeping pace beside them as they head towards the church. He and Reeve escort the young boy, Addie, through the streets of the town, making their way toward the church. As a large church with a bell tower comes into view, Addie points it out excitedly. Silva acknowledges their destination, privately thinking that he might be able to gather information about vampires from this place. Upon their arrival, a man in clerical robes rushes out, calling Addie's name with relief. The boy recognizes him as the priest. The man expresses his gladness that Addie is safe and asks if Silva and Reeve were the ones who brought him back. With a kind and gentle smile, the priest introduces himself as Dan, confirming that he is the child's guardian. Now safely home, Addie turns to his rescuers with a beaming expression, thanking Mr. Silva and Miss Charleses for their help. Dan's face is etched with relief as he explains to the pair that he nearly had a heart attack when the other children told him Addie had gotten separated. He tells them he cannot thank them enough. His tone shifts to gentle scolding as he tells Addie he made everyone worry. The boy protests, insisting that the others were the ones who got separated from him, not the other way around. Silva watches the interaction, noting internally that Dan is a good-hearted priest who knows how to properly discipline children. This makes him think the priest might be willing to answer his questions. He begins to take his leave, telling Dan not to worry about thanking them, but the priest stops him. Dan insists on expressing his gratitude and states that there is something he would like to ask. Dan then invites them inside the church, specifically asking Silva if he can spare some time for a private talk. Reeve agrees, and Silva, though slightly hesitant, concurs, wondering what the priest could want as long as it's something he can answer. He sits down with the priest, Dan, at a small table inside the church. Reeve stands a short distance away, observing the private conversation she was excluded from. Getting straight to the point, he expresses his hope that Dan could teach him anything he knows about vampires. The priest reacts with visible shock, repeating the word vampires in disbelief. He clarifies his request, explaining that he wants to learn about both the vampires that exist in myths and the recent vampire incident. Dan listens intently, his expression shifting to one of serious consideration. He apologizes for the strange line of questioning, admitting that while he believes the recent vampire issue has been resolved, something about the case continues to trouble him. The priest's gaze sharpens. He interrupts to ask if Silva happens to be a knight. Silva confirms that he is, though adds the qualifier for what it's worth. Upon hearing this, Dan's demeanor darkens. He looks down at his hands, clenching them tightly on his lap as he murmurs his understanding. Silva watches him, holding a cup. The priest then looks up, offering to share what he has learned as a cleric, provided Silva is content with hearing about legends. He asks if Silva would mind him recounting the details. Dan begins his lesson. He explains that the moniker vampire is a title used for demons from legends, said to have evolved from vampire bats. He warns that fables speak of them wielding power so immense they could level entire cities. He elaborates further, stating that their source of power is human blood. The more they consume, the stronger they become. A vampire who has managed to drink the blood of 10 people becomes so formidable that it would take several first-rate heroes to defeat them, and it's no easy feat. Finally, Dan adds that according to the fables, these powerful beings also had the ability to create minions. The term catches Silva by surprise, and he questions its meaning. His question about minions is met with a grave explanation from a priest. Dan's hands clasp as he clarifies that minions are humans who have been given a vampire's blood. According to legend, they gain powers similar to vampires and may even attack other humans. Silva absorbs the grim information, his expression hardening. He thanks Dan, stating that the detailed information has been very helpful. Beside him, Reeve calls out his name, sensing his somber mood. Before they can leave, the priest's attention is drawn to Silva's bandaged hand. Dan asks if he was injured, mentioning he had been wondering about it. Startled, Silva quickly claims he just burned it a while ago. The priest seems to accept the explanation, though his gaze lingers. He tells Silva to feel free to ask if he has any more questions. As he departs, he adds a final word of caution, telling the young man to take care of himself. Silva quietly promises he will. Outside the church, Reeve turns to him and apologizes for dragging him along for so long. She closes her eyes and tells him not to worry, as she was the one who invited him in the first place. She then asks what he and the priest were discussing, wondering if it was related to the vampire case. Silva confirms it, his mind drifting back to the battle as he mentions the strange feeling he had when he defeated the demon. He connects the priest's words to his own experience, voicing a chilling realization. There's a chance the creature he fought was a human who had been turned into a minion. The implication is stark. The true vampire might still be lurking somewhere in the city. His deep contemplation is broken when Reeve calls his name again. Snapping back to the present, he apologizes for being lost in thought and, noticing the late hour, offers to walk her home. He puffs his chest out slightly and declares with a grin that escort duty is also part of a soldier's job. Reeve looks at him, a hint of uncertainty on her face as she asks if he's sure. Her uncertainty gives way to a gentle smile. She seems to accept his offer, though a private thought crosses her mind. There was something she didn't get to tell him today. As they walked on, she glanced back towards the church, a faint, wistful smile touching her lips. She wondered to herself if the day would ever come when she could tell him everything. Her quiet contemplation was mirrored by his own grim introspection. Silva's gaze was distant, his expression hardening as a bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. The priest's warning about a true, hidden vampire echoed in his mind, a far more immediate and terrifying. At the bustling southern gate, Charles works diligently, checking documents and managing the seemingly endless queue of people waiting to enter the capital. He calls for the next person, clipboard in hand, marveling at the sheer number of arrivals. He reflects on the situation. With frequent demon incidents causing staff shortages everywhere, he feels compelled to fulfill his gatekeeping duties to the best of his ability. It's his first time assigned to the southern gate, and he had no idea it would be this busy. His thoughts drift to a more worrying pattern. The exponential increase in demon cases, coupled with the recent vampire incident, seems to be playing out exactly like the main story of the game he remembers. He senses a mishap in the original plans of the world. A sudden, chilling realization strikes him. He wonders with dread if this is all happening because he, an outsider, has become directly involved in the storyline. His internal monologue is abruptly cut short by a sharp shout of "Hey!" from behind, startling him out of his thoughts. The voice belongs to a fellow soldier who chides him for spacing out and demands he get back to his job. With a slight grimace, Charles acknowledges the senior soldier, addressing him as Mr. Crow and promising to resume his duties. He internally identifies the man, Crow, a senior soldier in charge of guarding this very gate. Charles concedes that while Crow has good looks, his character is another matter entirely. True to his thoughts, Crow's personality leaves much to be desired. He is already using his position to flirt with a young woman in the queue, asking for her name and commenting on her appearance. The woman, flustered, introduces herself as Yulia and explains she's from the next town over. Crow smoothly takes her hand, telling her he likes her name before asking her business in the royal capital. Yulia explains that she has secured a job as staff in a flower shop located in the shopping district. Watching the exchange, Charles seethes internally, annoyed that Crow is shamelessly hitting on girls while on duty. Crow, meanwhile, hands Yulia her permit, cheerfully telling her she's as pretty as a flower. He grits his teeth, demanding that his senior officer, Crow, do his job faster. While a traveler presents his permit, Crow dismisses Charles as a mere newbie who has no right to give him orders. His internal monologue is cut short when a familiar voice calls out from the crowd, addressing the gatekeeper over there. Charles internally fumes at Crow's audacity, thinking he has the nerve of a background character, just like himself, and dreads the thought of working with Modi. He instantly recognizes that voice. It belongs to Commander Elda Snow White, who approaches with a pleasant expression, stating that she happens to be looking for somebody. Before he can respond, Crow interjects, fawning over the commander's beauty and eagerly offering his assistance. As Elda, with a strained smile, specifies she is looking for a gatekeeper named Silva, Charles sees an opportunity and tries to slip away unnoticed. His escape attempt fails. Elda appears directly behind him, exclaiming that she's found him after all. She grabs his arm, informing him that she has a favor to ask and needs him to come to the Knight's headquarters immediately. To Crow's bewilderment, she declares she'll be borrowing Charles and drags him away. Moments later, they are in the commander's office at the Knight's HQ. Elda explains that although they just dealt with the vampire incident, another case has surfaced, a kidnapping. She reveals that all the victims are female, and their only clue is reports of a suspicious individual wearing a black cloak. The description brings a vivid image to Charles's mind, the menacing, cloaked figure he fought. He immediately voices his suspicion that this new case is related to the vampire. Elda questions this, reminding him that he took the vampire down. Charles confirms that he did, but admits that the fight felt surprisingly lackluster to him. He elaborates on his theory with a grave expression. He was told that vampires have the ability to create their own thralls, leading him to conclude there is a high probability that the creature he slayed was merely one of these subservient beings. The implication hangs heavy in the air as Elda realizes the true vampire must still be alive. Charles clenches his fist, his face contorted with regret. He believes that if he had only caught on sooner, he might have been able to stop this new incident from ever happening. He stands resolute as Commander Elda addresses him, explaining that with the vampire situation worsening, she needs his help in the search. With a sharpened take of breath, Charles immediately agrees. Elda looks on, surprised by his uncharacteristic eagerness, noting that he's usually more opposed to her requests. A determined smile crosses his face as he explains his reasoning. He feels he cannot let someone else clean up a mess he feels responsible for. Pleased by his motivation, Elda slams her hand on the desk and offers him a scroll. She tells him to take it, suggesting it might be a clue for his search. Charles looks at the offered item, his expression questioning. He takes the scroll, which lists the casualties from the vampire case. Elda clarifies that besides the girls he saved, there were other captives. These survivors are now hospitalized in a clinic. She suggests he go there, as they might provide a lead. Charles immediately asks for the clinic's location. The information startles him. Elda specifies the location, the Rachel Clinic, situated on the outskirts of town. She continues, warning him that the clinic's doctor, Rachel Forsard, is a troublesome character. Elda adds that Rachel is one of the conquerable characters of Brajo, and by deepening his bond with her, he might be able to purchase healing items more cheaply. With a confident smile, Elda tells him she is counting on him. Charles affirms that he understands and will go there at once. He arrives at the clinic, a wave of unpleasant memory washing over him. He hasn't been to such a place since rescuing the captive girls, and the thought of the lingering smell makes him grimace. Stepping inside, he calls out, "Excuse me, Miss Rachel. Are you here?" His eyes scan the room, noting shelves lined with what appear to be materials for making medicine. A woman with long hair and glasses emerges. She asks what he wants, questioning if someone is wounded or sick before dismissing the thought. As she looks at Charles, a flicker of recognition crosses her face, and she begins to recall who he is. He expresses his surprise that Dr. Forsard remembers him, noting they've only met once. She confirms his identity as the Gatekeeper who brought in the girls attacked by demons. She continues, recalling that he was with the top-grade hero, or, as she calls her, the monster. With a smirk, she agrees to hear him out. Leaning in with an unnerving intensity, a bit of drool escaping her lips, she asks for his name. He recoils, pointing out her drool and protesting her calling Kaguya a monster. He hesitantly introduces himself as Silva. The doctor, however, ignores his complaint, instead commenting on his amusing body before bluntly ordering him to get undressed. The command leaves him utterly stunned. Flustered, he asks what the point of undressing is. Dr. Forsard states her terms plainly. If he wants her to listen to his business, he must first get undressed. Having complied, he stands shirtless as another young woman explains that this is Rachel's bad habit. She clarifies that the doctor has a tendency to undress people to inspect their bodies, believing she can determine their character that way. As she examines his physique, Dr. Forsard observes that he is the type of person who can make himself look skinny while clothed. He can only offer a hesitant agreement. He begins to put his shirt back on as the doctor declares she now has a good idea about him. He questions how his body could possibly reveal anything about his character. Ignoring his question entirely, she correctly deduces that he is a soldier, not a knight. He confirms this, realizing with frustration that she isn't listening to him at all. She simply concludes that his body is very amusing. Her expression darkens as she menacingly suggests that, for a more thorough investigation, she could just dissect his body later. The threat sends a chill down his spine, but she immediately breaks the tension, revealing with a smirk that she was just kidding. He stands awkwardly before Dr. Forsard, finally explaining that he wishes to investigate the survivors of the recent vampire case. Seeing his hesitation, she bluntly asks what he needs from her. He elaborates on his suspicion that some vampires may still be alive and that he wants to question the survivors. Dr. Forsard counters that the case is supposed to be resolved and she already told the Knights everything she knows. Her dismissive demeanor shifts. She pauses, telling him to wait a moment as a realization dawns on her. Her eyes narrow as she murmurs that she understands. The doctor's realization is that he's referring to a specific girl. In the adjoining room, the young girl, Charlie, shrinks back from Charles, who understands she must be terrified after her ordeal. Dr. Forzert quickly reassures Charlie, telling her that Charles is a soldier of justice who protects the citizens. To ease her fear, Charles kneels and earnestly swears he will catch the ones who cause her such terror, promising to protect her and everyone else. Looking at him, the girl understands and agrees to cooperate. As she agrees, his gaze falls upon her hand. He points, asking what happened to it. A closer look reveals a strange, circular bruise on the back of her hand. He internally notes its peculiar shape. He asks if she remembers how she got it, but she looks away, distressed. She replies that she doesn't know, only that she already had the mark by the time the attacker came for her. Her words render him speechless. He stares, processing the critical implication. The mark existed before the attack. Despite his stunned silence, Charlie thanks him, saying he was a great help. He remains kneeling, lost in thought, as Dr. Forzert looks on. He presents his theory to the doctor, Rachel. He believes the circular mark is not a wound from the attack, but a marking etched by the vampire beforehand. Rachel, intrigued, asks him to elaborate on this idea. She concedes that his reasoning is logical. He admits, however, that it is merely a hypothesis for which he has no definitive proof yet. He continues, explaining that if his theory is correct, the mark could be a clue to identify potential victims before they are attacked. Feeling a renewed sense of purpose, he sincerely thanks Miss Rachel for her cooperation, confident he now has a solid lead. With a placid, almost unreadable expression, Rachel simply replies that she is glad she was of help. Her demeanor then shifts entirely. She jokingly demands a payment of 60,000 gold for her assistance. With a dark glint in her eye, she adds that, in exchange, she'd like to dissect him when he dies, as she can't let such a valuable sample go to waste. Charles, stunned, can only mutter that he'll think about it. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a priest approaches a young girl selling flowers from a cart. As he greets her, he compliments her beautiful wares. Flustered by the welcome, the girl asks for his order, but cries out in pain as she pricks her finger on a thorn. The priest's gaze falls upon her hand, where a familiar circular bruise is visible. The girl dismisses it, explaining she got it yesterday, and, being a klutz, must have hit it somewhere without noticing. His expression turns grim. He warns her that misfortune will befall her if she leaves it be, thinking it's a mere bruise. He declares that it is, in fact, the devil's curse. The girl is horrified by his words. Seeing her terror, the priest insists they go to the church at once to have the curse removed before it's too late. The frightened girl immediately agrees, pleading with him to inside an office. Captain Elda Snow White sits at her desk with a grim expression, briefing Charles, who stands before her. She confirms that, yes, another woman was kidnapped the previous night. With that, she slides a report across the desk, explaining that it contains information on the victim. As Charles takes the document, his eyes widen in sudden, shocked recognition. His mind flashes back to a recent, cheerful memory of a young woman with freckles introducing herself as Yulia. The memory fades, leaving him clenching his eyes shut in frustration. He curses inwardly, unable to believe that the girl he had just met the day before has now been kidnapped. He regains his composure, looking at Elda with renewed determination and thanking her for the information. She cautions him not to act on his own, assuring him that the knights will provide their help. He interrupts her, however, stating that he is already considering a plan. Intrigued, Elda asks him what it is. He begins to explain his theory to Miss Elda, pointing out two key patterns he has noticed: the specific marks left on the victim's hands, and the curious fact that only children have been surviving the incidents. He looks at her with a confident glint in his eye, declaring that based on the leads they have, he wants to lay a trap for the kidnapper. The scene shifts. Elsewhere, in a darkened hall lined with beds, the priest Dan walks with a determined purpose. A sleeping child stirs as he passes by. He continues his purposeful stride, his expression serious in profile, until he stops before a large, ornate door marked with a cross. A figure, shrouded in a light-colored hood that casts their face in shadow, steps forward hesitantly. They address someone out of view, their voice soft and uncertain. The hooded person presents their gloved hand, explaining that their concern is about a mark upon it. The priest, Dan, adjusts his glasses and asks what the matter is, but as he leans in for a closer look, his expression shifts to one of stark shock. His shock gives way to a serious inquiry. He asks when they received the mark. The hooded individual replies that it appeared quite recently, sometime after their arrival in the royal capital. Dan's eyes narrow behind his glasses. With grim certainty, he declares that the mark is the devil's curse. The revelation stuns the hooded person, who recoils in disbelief. In desperation, they clasp their hands and plead with the priest to save them. Dan raises a hand reassuringly, promising to break the curse and telling them not to worry about any reward. The hooded person agrees, seemingly relieved by his promise. Seeing their compliance, Dan gestures for them to follow him, leading them deeper into the building. Once inside a private room, he presents a cup of steaming tea. He tells them to drink it and relax, explaining that he will begin with counseling. Now seated, Dan notes that the tea has calming effects and a pleasant aroma. The hooded individual takes a sip and agrees that it is very good, their face still obscured. A moment later, a wave of dizziness hits them. They begin to wobble unsteadily, their hood slipping back to reveal the face of a young woman with dark hair. She clutches her head, completely disoriented and struggling to form words. From his seat, Dan watches her collapse, his expression placid as he calmly asks what the matter is. He watches as the hooded woman slumps forward with a heavy thud. With a look of grim satisfaction, he confirms to himself that she has been put to sleep. With his target incapacitated, he effortlessly lifts her over his shoulder and carries her through a doorway into a more secluded area. He proceeds into a dimly lit storage room, filled with crates and barrels, and lays the woman's still form on the floor. Now that she is helpless, he pulls out a length of rope, preparing to bind her hands. But as he leans over her, the woman's eyes snap open. The hood falls back, revealing not the timid victim he expected, but the sharp, mischievous gaze of Lady Kaguya. Dan freezes, his face a mask of pure shock. She sits up, a confident smirk on her face, and addresses the stunned priest. She expresses mock disbelief that he, a rogue priest, would actually try to tie her up. He stumbles back in terror, shouting in confusion. He demands to know how this is possible, insisting that she should have been unconscious from the sleeping pills. In response, she calmly gestures to a small, dark, fish-like creature that floats in the air beside her. She asks coolly if this is what he was referring to. The creature lets out a small belch. Kaguya adds with a smile that while she didn't drink the tea, her companion found it quite delicious. The priest can only stare in horror, a guttural sound of dread escaping his lips. She rises to her feet, her expression turning serious as she declares that bad people must be punished. As Dan begins to plead for his life, she cuts him off with a simple, firm nope, pointing at him decisively. She will not spare him. She strikes with sudden force, sending the priest flying across the room. With a feigned apology to Sir Dan, she watches him crash to the ground, a small orb of light dissipating in her hand. He stares up from the floor, his eyes wide with disbelief as he struggles to form the words, recognizing her identity. Before he can finish his thought, Charles steps into view, holding a length of rope. With Kaguya standing calmly behind him, he informs the downed priest, "I'll be tying you up." He looks back over his shoulder, remarking to Kaguya that he's very impressed. He admits he can't believe she was able to act like a frail woman. With the priest now securely bound, Charles concludes, "And that is that." She responds with a playful, closed-eye smile, insisting that she's a frail damsel after all. The comment causes a bead of sweat to run down Charles's face. The bound priest, looking defeated, finally asks Charles how he figured it out, questioning what made him suspicious of him in the first place. He begins to explain his deductions. He recalls the case of a single girl who survived a vampire attack, noting that vampires typically suck their victims' dry blood. He continues, postulating that the vampire must have had their reasons for sparing her. Perhaps they became attached to a child they were close to, which led him to believe the kidnapper showed sympathy toward the child. He finishes this line of thought by stating that this is an important lead for solving the case. The priest, aghast, asks if that was all that was needed to suspect him, but Charles clarifies that's not all. His captive's confusion is palpable. Charles adds that the kidnapper left hardly any traces before trailing off. The other reason is, he continued his explanation to the bound priest, pointing out the suspicious scarcity of citing reports for the serial kidnappings. Considering how much the townspeople trusted Dan, it seemed almost as if the victims had gone to the vampire of their own accord. It would have been simple. If Dan were to tell them he could break their supposed curse, they would have believed him without question and followed him willingly. As Kaguya nonchalantly wiped her hand, Charles moved on to the most suspicious detail of all, the fact that people who received a mark out of nowhere suddenly became terrified of it. He then stated his conclusion plainly. The mark was a fake. The priest's eyes widened in shock behind his glasses. He had been found out. Kaguya interjected, noting the girl's absence and bluntly asking if they had already been devoured. The callous question enraged Charles, who slammed his foot down and shouted at her audacity. His glare shifted back to Dan. He accused the priest of putting the marked girls to sleep, confining them, and turning innocent people into food. Dan flinched, his expression a mixture of horror and disbelief. Regaining his composure, Charles informed Dan that he needed to be taken to the Knight's headquarters. He admitted that while he would rather cut him down right there, he would behave himself and follow procedure. To ensure the priest's quiet cooperation, he held up a folded note, warning him not to make any noise. He didn't want the orphans to see what was happening. Dan looked down at the note. The message was one of understanding, not accusation. It stated that they knew he was being threatened and asked him to come with them for now, implying they wanted to help. Sometime later, at the Knight's headquarters, Captain Elda Snow White reported that their interrogation of the priest was complete. However, despite their efforts, Dan stubbornly insisted that he alone was the culprit behind the kidnappings. She presses Charles for his reasoning, asking if he is truly certain that Dan is not the kidnapper. With his arms crossed, Charles explains his theory. Dan was not a willing accomplice, but was threatened into assisting the vampires, who likely used the safety of the church's children as leverage. He continues, recalling how Dan had overreacted to the mere mention of the word vampire during their first encounter. Furthermore, Dan had also provided him with information about the vampire's thralls, a detail that seemed out of place for a true culprit. These clues, he explains, led him to believe that Dan's strange behavior was not a sign of guilt, but rather a desperate, unspoken plea for help, an SOS signal. Kaguya, having listened to his deduction, immediately grasps the implications. She concludes that Dan must still be under the vampire surveillance, which would explain the ongoing correspondence through letters. She adds another piece of evidence to support his theory, pointing out that she was not attacked when she was in disguise. The vampires, she reasons, would never mistake one of their marked victims up close, suggesting Dan was being forced to identify targets for them. Impressed by his intellect, Kaguya playfully pinches Charles's cheek, calling him a sharp cookie and a great detective. As Charles begins to state the grim tally, that the vampires have already fed on 10 people, Elda cuts in with a sharp clearing of her throat, bringing the briefing back to a serious tone. Charles observes that their power has undoubtedly increased immensely. Elda voices her concern, stating that if they are not stopped, many more people will fall victim to the vampires. A sudden realization dawns on Charles. He connects the timing of the vampire attacks to an event from the game scenario he remembers, the upcoming mock battles at the Heroes Academy. The coincidence feels deliberate. He internally pieces together the horrifying possibility. If level 3 demons were to attack during the mock battles at the same time as another vampire kidnapping, the hero candidates themselves would be in grave danger. Alarmed by this potential two-pronged assault, he urgently turns to Kaguya. He turns his attention to Kaguya, his expression serious. He explains that there's a favor he can only ask of her. Her eyes narrow with intrigue, a slight smile playing on her lips as she leans closer and asks what it is. The request concerns another powerful figure, Elda Snow White. The scene shifts to her, standing alone at night, gazing up at a tall, solitary structure illuminated by the full moon, the moon tower. Her thoughts drift back to her own conversation with Charles. She recalls her initial gladness that he was finally going to rely on her, a feeling that quickly soured into wry amusement when he asked her to help his love rival. With a sharp turn, her long hair and cape billow as she moves on. Now, facing Kaguya directly, Elda relays the message from the man she calls Silva. She explains that he told her that if Kaguya wished to grow stronger, she should seek out Elda for training. Kaguya listens, her expression unreadable as she processes the proposition, before murmuring that she understands. Kaguya's neutral expression breaks into a gentle smile. She formally accepts, stating she's glad to be Elda's student. In stark contrast, Elda's face twists into a sharp, menacing grin. She warns Kaguya not to die, promising to see to it that her body learns every single thing she drills. Within the designated trial forest, the Knights of the Chivalric Order address the assembled hero candidates, expressing their utmost respect. Standing among them, Silva understands that the combat practicals are finally about to begin. His friend, Alan, approaches him, gesturing towards a lone figure in the distance. He asks Silva why that girl, who he believes is a member of their party, is standing all by herself. The girl is Charlie Orland. Silva looks towards her with a neutral expression and states plainly that Miss Charles is no longer a member of their party. Elsewhere, another candidate expresses his disbelief that Charlie would leave her party to face the dangers of the combat practicals alone. His companion questions if it's right to leave her be. At the same time, Silva feels a hostile gaze upon him and realizes that the Gatekeeper, Crow, is also present among the candidates. Deciding he can ignore Crow for now, Silva's attention returns to Charlie. He perceives a powerful aura of dignity surrounding her, becoming certain that she is now the strongest student in terms of both skill and power. Though he wishes he didn't have to, he resolves to ask Kaguya to give Charlie direct tutelage. An examiner from the Knightly Order begins his briefing. He announces that within the trial forest, they will face not only level 3 and level 4 monsters, but even level 1 monsters, causing a stir of shock among the candidates. He sternly warns them that they will be monitored and must call for help immediately if they find themselves in danger. The examiner then defers to Captain Elda Snow White for the remaining details. She explains that the combat arena is defined by a barrier cast on the side of the academy. Stakes have been driven into the ground to mark the boundaries, and she cautions them not to go beyond them. She concludes the explanation by stating their scores will be decided by how many monsters and demons they slay within the barrier. Wishing them the best, she gives a command for the combat practicals to begin. As she speaks, Rena, Cassius crouches, poised to dash into the forest. As the trial commences, Silva immediately runs towards Charlie. She turns to face him, asking if he needs something. He looks at her with deep concern, telling her that taking the practicals alone is far too dangerous. He pleads with her to rejoin his party, promising to fix his flaws and protect her with his life. He gives his word that he will treasure her. However, Charlie's expression hardens. She firmly rejects his offer, declaring that she is done with being protected by others. From now on, she will protect herself. She walks away into the forest, stating that she has things to do and ordering him to stop following. Unwilling to let her go, Silva runs after her, calling out for Charles to wait. Ignoring his plea, she glances back with a determined look, shouting that she isn't done talking with him as she continues to run deeper into the woods. His pursuit is cut short as another candidate, a woman he recognizes as Miss Liba, suddenly appears before him. He asks what she is doing there, but but his question is forgotten as he spots a glowing, ring-like mark on her hand. He realizes with shock that it's the thrall's mark Silva had warned him about. Stunned, he asks what she means. Miss Liba looks at him coldly, confirming that she has been turned into a vampire thrall. She explains that Silva had told her about the possibility of a mole, a thrall, passing information to vampires, and that demons might attack during the combat practicals. The pieces click into place for Silva. His eyes widen as he stares at her, the terrible realization dawning on him. Miss Liba, he says, his voice filled with disbelief. So you were the mole all along. As she stands silently, the barrier protecting the forest suddenly begins to crackle and shatter. Alarmed, Silva demands to know what is happening. He sees her hand glowing with dark energy and warns her to stop, threatening to strike her down. Her only response is a quiet, chilling declaration. It's futile. From the shadows behind her, a massive, brutish demon emerges, grabbing Miss Liba by the head. The creature holds her up effortlessly, declaring that the woman is nothing more than a puppet. The demon sneers, explaining that the puppet's role was simply to create a hole in the barrier. Now that her purpose is fulfilled, he declares her to be mere trash and violently flings her aside. Silva can only cry out her name in horror. Enraged, Silva draws his sword. He assumes the creature is a level 1 demon allocated for the practicals and demands to know what it did to Miss Liba. A thought flashes through his mind. If he can defeat this demon and protect Charles, perhaps she will understand. With a furious shout, he unleashes his attack, lightning slash. The energy blast strikes the demon dead on. Silva believes the attack, while weaker than soulbound, should be enough for a level 1 demon. But the creature stands completely unharmed, scoffing. Hey now, it taunts, did you seriously think you could beat me with this weak attack? Don't lump me in with level 1 fodder. The hulking demon, unfazed by the previous attack, smirks with absolute confidence. He declares that he is on a completely different level of power, of a level 3. He cracks his knuckles with a sharp snap, promising to be the one who crushes all heroes. With a cruel grin, he introduces himself as Garrett, telling his foe to take that name to the afterlife. The revelation sends a shock through the onlookers. Silva stares, repeating the demon's rank in disbelief. Nearby, Alan expresses his dismay that no one warned them about facing such powerful monsters. Charlie Orland has also arrived on the scene, calling out Silva's name, Charles. Garrett turns his attention to her, a questioning look on his face. Charlie confronts the demon directly. She states that since he admitted to controlling Miss Liba, he must be working with the vampires and following their orders. She demands to know the vampire's location. Garrett, his face contorting in anger, questions how she knows about the vampires, but declares he is under no obligation to tell her anything. Enraged by her knowledge, Garrett lunges towards Charlie, his massive fist crackling with power. From the side, Silva watches in alarm, sensing the incredible magical force emanating from the demon. As the demon charges, Alan calls out his name in warning. Garrett roars that he'll be damned if he lets their plan go off course, vowing to kill Charlie right there, even as he wonders how she discovered their secrets. Shaking off a brief moment of fear, Silva leaps forward with renewed determination. He shouts that he will protect Charlie, declaring that the demon's power level is irrelevant. His blade intercepts the demon's path, striking Garrett's arm with a dull thud. The attack halts. Garrett looks down, impressed by the boy's audacity to stand against him. Silva, however, is horrified, realizing the demon's arm is as hard as stone. Garrett laughs, mocking the weak attack, but Silva's mind races. He knows he must find a weak spot. In a flash, he pivots away from the demon's front, surprising him. Got you, Silva exclaims, having found an opening. He twists his body and brings his sword around in a powerful slash, striking the demon's exposed back. You're mine, he cries out as the blade bites deep, drawing blood. The demon's blow slammed into him with brutal force. Garrett loomed over the staggering youth, a cruel sneer on his face as he questioned if he finally understood. The demon boasted that his mighty, mana-imbued body was without flaw. In defiance, blood trickling from his lips, Charles screamed back that he had no weakness. He was sent skidding across the dusty ground, landing in a heap. Garrett paid him no further mind, licking his lips in anticipation. He declared the appetizer finished and turned his gaze towards another combatant. With a predatory grin, he announced it was time for the main dish, directing his words to the young woman standing nearby. In response, the young woman, Miss Liba, crouched low as a powerful aura began to glow around her. She admitted she knew all along that he was miles stronger than the brat he had just dispatched. Undeterred, Garrett slammed his fists together, roaring for her to come at him. He bellowed his intent to take her small body and slug it until it was nothing but minced meat. She rose to her feet, undaunted by his threat. Try doing it if you think you can, she challenged coolly. Extending a hand, she began her summons as a glowing sigil materialized on the ground. Your master is calling you, she commanded, her voice ringing with power. Appeareth before me now, Fenrir. As the summoning commenced, the moment was already being recorded in the annals of history. An open chronicle detailed the events, noting that the students were under attack by level 3 monsters. The text concluded that this very conflict would be remembered as the first ever battle of the hero, Charles.